Chapter 461. Drops of tears squeezed out from Sasuke's eyes, and tears continued to flow down Sasuke's cheeks, leaving a shallow tear stain. But Sasuke didn't cry out any sound. This wasn't because Sasuke could control his emotions, but because Sasuke couldn't control himself at all. The sadness and pain were choked in his throat, so tears seemed to be the only way for Sasuke to vent his inner feelings. Drops of tears kept flowing from Sasuke's eyes, across his cheeks and dripped to the ground. Sasuke didn't know how many tears he cried, but warm liquid never stopped flowing from his eyes. If someone could stand opposite Sasuke, it wouldn't be difficult to find that Sasuke's tears had unknowingly turned into blood tears, and bright red traces of blood were left on Sasuke's face. The three Tomo Sharingan, which had already shown signs of transforming into Manjikyu Sharingan, also rotated at a high speed at this moment, and gradually the three Tomo continued to expand and gradually connected together. The outline of a six-pointed star appeared in Sasuke's eyes, and even the sadness couldn't cover the brilliance of this pair of Manjikyu Sharingan. Although Sasuke couldn't see what happened to his eyes, the sudden appearance of a powerful eye power completely different from the three Tomo Sharingan told Sasuke that his eyes had evolved again. Only by personally participating in the death of a loved one, can the cursed power be awakened? In Sasuke's view, if it wasn't to expel the remnants of Orochimaru's power from his body, his brother would never have lost his life like this. What's the difference between such a scene and killing his brother with his own hands? Perhaps he had cried enough, or perhaps he was tired of crying. Sasuke raised his sleeve and wiped his face, wiping the tears that were already all over his face. Sasuke took out the scroll that Hoodlum had thrown to him and gently opened it. Sasuke found that it was filled with dense patterns. If ordinary people saw such patterns, they would be dazzled and dizzy in less than 2 minutes. But Sasuke, who had just awakened his Manjikyu Sharingan, didn't close his Manjikyu Sharingan. These dense patterns slowly surged in Sasuke's eyes at this moment, forming a character. Sasuke carefully looked at the hidden text in the scroll, and for a moment he was fascinated. The patterns in this scroll were copied from the stone tablet in the ancestral hall of the Uchiha clan. The stone tablet recorded some mysteries about the Sharingan and some secrets of the ninja world. The origin of the Uchiha clan and the mystery of Manjikyu Sharingan were naturally also recorded in it. Sasuke looked at the scroll and whispered softly, "Eyes of loved one. Eternal Manjikyu, eternal Manjikyu." Sasuke finally understood what Hoodlum said about his brother's last legacy. By transplanting his brother's Manjikyu Sharingan, he can make his Manjikyu evolve again, eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. He doesn't have to worry about his dojutsu drying up, and it may even give birth to a new power. After a short whisper, there was a long silence. Sasuke just quietly looked at the scroll in his hand that recorded all kinds of secrets, and his eyes passed over his brother from time to time. Outside the room where Sasuke was located, the three members of the Snake Squad and Nangongja were staring at the door, waiting for Sasuke to appear. The three members of the Snake Squad looked very nervous. After all, such a squad actually existed with Sasuke as the core. Once Sasuke couldn't accept the fact that his brother died, then such a squad naturally couldn't be talked about. For the three members of Sasuke's team, the Snake Squad was an important existence to achieve their respective goals. Once such a squad no longer exists, it also means that their goals will be difficult to achieve. Nangongja looked very calm. After all, Nangongja also watched Sasuke walk step by step to this extent. Nangongja also understood the confusion and pain that Sasuke experienced. Because of this, Nangongja was more aware of how strong Sasuke's heart was. There was no way to completely defeat Sasuke's suffering. For Sasuke, it was an opportunity to go further. Squeak! The door of the room where Sasuke was located gently opened, and Sasuke walked out with firm steps. Seeing Sasuke, the three members of the Snake Squad immediately greeted him. Although they were worried, no one spoke. Because Sasuke's eyes were staring at Nangongja at the moment. Obviously he had something to say. Slowly walking to Nangongja's side, Sasuke suddenly bowed to Nangongja, and his proud spine bent down at the moment. "Nangong-sensei, thank you. If it weren't for you, I might have to do something that even I can't forgive myself because of the sadness and hatred in my heart. It was you who gave me the opportunity to let my brother leave this world with a smile. It was also you who gave my family a chance to save their lives. Although I hope that I can help you more, at this moment I can only say such a soft thank you to you," Sasuke said sincerely. The more Sasuke grew, the more he understood how unfathomable his Kenjutsu sensei was. However, Nangongja's strength directly made Sasuke have no way to repay Nangongja. After all, what Sasuke could do, Nangongja could do even better. So Sasuke could only say such a soft thank you to Nangongja for telling him the truth and saving his parents' lives. Nangongja patted Sasuke's shoulder, just like how he treated Sasuke when he was a child, and said with a caring tone, "Don't be like this. Sensei helped you not only because you are my disciple, but I also gained a lot from it, so you don't have to take my motives too seriously. But I see that you have come out of the sadness of Itachi's departure, and it seems that you have redefined your goal, which makes me feel more gratified." Unlike the previous Sasuke who was full of hatred and paranoia, the current Sasuke's eyes were much clearer. Nangongja liked this look very much, so Nangongja's face also had a little smile. Chapter 462. Nangongji-sensei, I've decided to join Akatsuki. Not for any other reason, I just hope that my brother's work won't end in vain. Furthermore, it seems that I can only make greater progress if I go to that suspicious person's place. Sasuke said his decision to Nangongji-sensei. Sasuke, who has been following Orochimaru, has actually been exposed to a lot of information that is difficult for ordinary ninjas to access. Although it seems like a pool of stagnant water now, Sasuke naturally saw the hidden waves surging in the shinobi world. A catastrophe that can't be resisted by a single person is quietly brewing, and Akatsuki, as the core of the storm, is naturally the place to understand and even eliminate such a catastrophe. Nangongji-sensei took Sasuke's hand and led him step by step to the front of the blood cloth pavilion's gate. Since it's something you've decided on, then go on bravely. You have been very smart since you were a child, and after so many years of experience, I also believe that you can be responsible for the decisions you make, so I won't say anything unnecessary to you. After all, I also hate nagging. You just need to remember that no matter when you need me or the blood cloth pavilion's help, you must tell me. With that, Nangongji-sensei took out a carved red jade pendant from his arms and stuffed it in Sasuke's hand. It was the chief token that represented the blood cloth pavilion's prestige. Looking at the precious chief token that was once again given to Sasuke by Nangongji-sensei, Aoki, who has been on the side, opened his eyes wide in disbelief. If it weren't for Sasuke's Uchiha clan bloodline and age, Aoki would have thought that Sasuke was likely to be Nangongji-sensei's illegitimate child. Otherwise, how could such a token be given to Sasuke again and again? Looking at the chief token that was given to him by Nangongji-sensei, Sasuke didn't refuse. Instead, he solemnly received the chief token in his hand. Sasuke was very clear that what he will face later is likely to be impossible to deal with alone, so accepting Nangongji-sensei's kindness is actually a matter of course, isn't it? When the three members of the Snake Squad saw Sasuke receive the chief token from Nangongji-sensei, they immediately felt relieved. After seeing the size of the blood cloth pavilion and the strong in it, the three people were very clear how powerful the blood cloth pavilion was. Such a token is no different from a life-saving means. Originally, they were worried that Sasuke wouldn't accept because of his pride, so after seeing Sasuke accept such a token, they also cast a grateful look at Nangongji-sensei. Patting Sasuke's shoulder, Nangongja said to Sasuke very freely, "Well, since you have already decided on the path you want to take, there is no need to hesitate. When you joined Orochimaru, I didn't stop you. This time I won't stop you either. Work hard and achieve your goal." Hearing Nangongji-sensei's words, Sasuke didn't have any pretentious expression. After nodding to Nangongji-sensei, he walked out of the blood cloth pavilion's gate with his teammates and took firm and powerful steps towards the deep forest. Seeing Sasuke's figure disappear, Nangongji-sensei finally turned his head and said to Old Man Aoki, who had been standing behind him and obviously had something to say. "Altar Leader Aoki, what do you want to say to me now?" Nangongja knew that Old Man Aoki, a veteran of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, must have some grudges in his heart when he saw him giving the Blood Cloak Pavilion chief token to Sasuke again and again. So he didn't hide anything and asked Old Man Aoki. After all, Old Man Aoki has been with Nangongji-sensei for a long time, so he naturally has some understanding of Nangongji-sensei's character. Although Nangongji-sensei's mind is very flexible, most of the time he still hates the way of speaking in a roundabout way, so Old Man Aoki naturally said what he wanted to say. "Leader, I really don't understand why you helped this kid from the Uchiha clan again and again. The reputation of the Uchiha clan in the ninja world is obvious to all, that is, a group of fickle and greedy wolves, there is no possibility of feeding them. And although this kid's aptitude is good, it's only good. Although he could be called a prodigy among his peers in the blood clothing pavilion, that was all there was to it. You invested so much in him, I really don't think it's worth it." Listening to Old Man Aoki's words, Nangongji-sensei also nodded his head from time to time. Because what Old Man Aoki said is indeed true, There are countless geniuses in this world, and it's easy for them to grow up after getting the right training. Sasuke is not so unique after all. Nangongji-sensei's efforts are really not enough to make ends meet. Alter Leader Aoki, I understand what you mean, but I don't regret such a decision. Sasuke can be regarded as a child that I have seen since he was a child. For a cultivator, talent, hard work, and opportunities are all indispensable factors for growth. But I see the trace of destiny in Sasuke. I always have a hunch. Sasuke may be the next Uchiha Madara of the Uchiha clan, or even an existence that surpasses Uchiha Madara. This hunch comes without a reason, but it makes me extremely convinced. Now it seems that I have paid a lot, but in fact, most of it is insignificant. Our Blood Garment Pavilion and myself didn't suffer too many losses. Using such a small amount of resources in exchange for the friendship of a possible future super expert is actually worth it. If my hunch is true, our Blood Cloth Pavilion will naturally make a lot of money. If my premonition is not true, then just treat it as me, the head disciple, being obsessed for a moment and making a small foolish move. Nangongji-sensei's words have already reached this point. Even old man Aoki had nothing more to say. Thinking about it carefully, even if Sasuke really misused the chief token, what kind of consequences will it lead to? At worst, they will just sacrifice a few disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. If they really want to drag the Blood Cloth Pavilion into the undercurrent of the ninja world, it's useless to rely on a chief token that has more symbolic meaning than practical significance. As for whether Nangongji-sensei can do well in his position as the chief of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, hasn't it been enough to prove it over the years? Chapter 463. After leaving the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Sasuke took his 3 teammates to the address recorded in the scroll given to him by Hoodlum. During the journey, Sasuke also explained his plan to his 3 teammates. After all, Akatsuki is not a gathering place of good men and women, and the danger involved in it is self-evident. After Orochimaru escaped from Akatsuki, he could only hide from Akatsuki's pursuit. I know that what I do is very dangerous, and I also know that each of you chose to follow me for your own reasons. For my wish, you put your life on the balance. Such a thing is not what I expect. So now I'm giving you a chance. If you don't want to take risks with me, you can leave now. Seeing that his group was about to reach the meeting place indicated by Hoodlum, Sasuke suddenly stopped his footsteps and looked at his 3 teammates who had been following him silently all the way. If it was before under Orochimaru's command, such a question would never exist. Sasuke would only use all means to force his 3 teammates to take risks with him. But now, Sasuke's mentality has changed quietly. Human life seems to have some value in Sasuke's eyes that can't be ignored. Sasuke's question also stunned Hanrin, Suigetsu, and Yugo. Watching his 2 companions fall into silence, Suigetsu touched the huge Zanpakuto on his back with his hand. His eyes seemed to have some reminiscence as he said to Sasuke, "Oh? I didn't expect that the 2 bravest members in our team would actually shrink back this time." With a sarcastic smile, Suigetsu's eyes swept over Hanrin and Yugo. "I actually don't like troublesome things. Things like joining a dangerous place like Akatsuki. If it's a normal time, I will definitely refuse without hesitation. But if you ask me now, am I willing to join Akatsuki with you, I will tell you with certainty that I am willing. My brother has been a genius since he was a child. Everyone I know since I was a child would praise my brother in front of me without hesitation. He skillfully used the 7 secret swords of the mist-hidden village to complete a difficult task. Such a brother is simply the most dazzling sun in the sky. I once thought that I would be stung by my brother's brilliance in my life, but who would have thought that such a dazzling brother would die so quietly? After being caught by Orochimaru, I felt very confused. I thought that I might only be locked in a narrow cultivation tank and become Orochimaru's plaything." At this point, Shueiyue's face revealed a very rare expression of powerlessness. It was a sharp contrast to her usual cheerful appearance. So even the seemingly happy and lively Shueiyue could actually show such an expression? But soon, Suigetsu regained his usual smiling appearance. After reaching out and pointing in the direction of Sasuke, Suigetsu continued. "It's you, Uchiha Sasuke, who rescued me from that kind of predicament. It allowed me to obtain the great beheading blade and allowed me to find the path after that. So, no matter what kind of danger we will encounter, I, Suigetsu, will accompany you to the end. We agreed to collect all the 7 swords of the mist-hidden village. You can't just turn a blind eye to the shark face in the Akatsuki." After listening to Suigetsu's words, Sasuke didn't know what kind of expression to make in response to Suigetsu's trust and following. After all, he had a lot of selfish motives when he recruited them. Sasuke could only nod with a pale face, signaling Suigetsu to stand behind him. Suigetsu didn't seem to care. After all, everyone knew Sasuke's character. After listening to Suigetsu's words, Red Lotus also tidied up his hair and said to Sasuke, "Suigetsu, this guy is still so talkative. Such a simple thing he has to say so much. Since I have decided to be your teammate, how can I give up so easily? No matter what kind of danger he will encounter, I am not afraid. In other words, the more dangerous it is, the happier I feel." Red Lotus looked a little excited, as if she had already imagined the appearance of fighting with countless strong people. That kind of happy mood and rushing out of the room was engraved on Red Lotus's heroic face. Like Suigetsu, Red Lotus also slowly stood behind Sasuke. Sasuke, Red Lotus, and Suigetsu all put their eyes on Yugo, who was still standing in the same place. Yugo scratched his head slightly and seemed to be a little embarrassed and said to Sasuke and the others, "I'm sorry. I'm a very slow person who can't express his feelings. You all said so much, I don't know what to say. But you are people who make me feel like companions. Since you are companions, naturally you can't abandon each other because of a little difficulty. Let's keep going." Turning his head, Sasuke's eyes swept over his three teammates and unknowingly, his face also quietly climbed up with a smile. He seems to have unknowingly gained a few friends who are worth cherishing for a lifetime. He didn't say much because Suigetsu, Red Lotus, and Yugo's attitude had already been revealed. Saying one more word in such a situation, Sasuke felt that it would be an insult to his three teammates. So Sasuke just turned his body silently and set foot in the direction of meeting Hoodlum again. Seeing Sasuke's expression, Suigetsu, Red Lotus, and Yugo smiled at each other. They seemed very happy and followed Sasuke's forward steps together. How satisfying and happy it is for a person to be able to find something they are willing to do and someone they are willing to follow in their life. At this moment, Suigetsu, Red Lotus, and Yugo's hearts were filled with a sense of satisfaction. It was this kind of satisfaction that made Suigetsu, Red Lotus, and Yugo feel that they can face any difficulties. After all, they will never be alone from now on, and they will always have their teammates standing by their side, right? Everyone was actually afraid of being alone. Chapter 464. I knew you would come. Because you are a member of the Uchiha family, you are Itachi's younger brother. Looking at Sasuke, who was slowly walking towards him with his three companions, Hoodlum's eyes flashed with confidence. Ignoring Suigetsu and the others, Hoodlum just looked at Sasuke and said. And Hoodlum's words were naturally heard by Sasuke. When he heard Hoodlum say his brother's name, Sasuke already wanted to pull out his long sword and tell this hypocritical guy, how can he casually mention his brother's name? But Sasuke has grown up. He was no longer the naive and ignorant boy who used to put all his emotions on his face. So he suppressed his anger and kept his cold expression. Sasuke said to Hoodlum, brother Hoodlum, I'm here and I agree to your conditions." The so-called conditions were actually very simple. Hoodlum hoped that Sasuke could replace his brother Itachi Uchiha's position and become a member of Akatsuki. After all, Sharingan has a unique advantage in dealing with Bijou. The loss of Itachi has actually hindered Akatsuki's recovery of Bijou. But Hoodlum, who also has Manjikyu Sharingan, can't appear so openly to collect Bijou. Pain, who has Rinnegan, also has to stabilize Akatsuki's situation, so Sasuke, who also has Manjikyu Sharingan, naturally became the best candidate to recruit into Akatsuki. And the Manjikyu Sharingan left by the dead Itachi can push Sasuke's Manjikyu Sharingan to the height of eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. Of course, since it's a deal, Sasuke naturally also got a promise that Akatsuki will provide shelter for Sasuke, and Sasuke's snake team will participate in Akatsuki's operations as a semi-mercenary, and not completely become a member of Akatsuki. So, Itachi's eyes, Hoodlum's eyes had a bit of light and his meaning was self-evident. Hoodlum obviously hoped that Sasuke could use Itachi's legacy, as soon as possible and turn his eyes into eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. Only with enough strength can he complete Akatsuki's tasks more efficiently, right? After hearing Hoodlum's words, Sasuke's originally suppressed anger finally burned uncontrollably. His originally dark eyes were covered with scarlet blood in an instant, and Manjikyu Sharingan in the shape of a hexagram appeared in Sasuke's eyes. Sasuke's eye power was mobilized crazily, and the powerful ninjutsu brought by Manjikyu Sharingan was instantly summoned by Sasuke. Although it was only in the form of a skeleton and not a complete body, the aura that seemed to come from ancient times rushed straight toward Hoodlum. Sasuke Susanoo raised his arm, and the virtual armament Heavenly Hemp Ancient Bow appeared on Susanoo's arm. Under Sasuke's control, Susanoo pulled the bowstring of Heavenly Hemp Ancient Bow with one hand, and the dark Amaterasu flame turned into a black arrow, and the burning arrowhead pointed straight at Hoodlum. Only I can decide these things. Remember the relationship between you and me, you have no right to order me, and no right to dispose of my brother's body. In the face of Sasuke's almost naked threat, Hoodlum not only didn't get angry but he also laughed. This is what I want. Hoodlum's heart was very clear that Itachi was a taboo for Sasuke, and being mentioned by anyone may arouse Sasuke's anger. But after seeing Sasuke, Hoodlum intentionally or unintentionally mentioned Itachi Uchiha's name, with the purpose of testing Sasuke's reaction. At the beginning, Sasuke's calm appearance actually made Hoodlum's heart very uncalm, because such a calm attitude was not what Hoodlum wanted to see. Therefore, Hoodlum could only continue to use Itachi's body to stimulate Sasuke with Itachi's Manjikyu Sharingan. Fortunately this time, it was not beyond Hoodlum's expectations, and Sasuke burst into a strong anger. Even under the stimulation of such emotions, Sasuke actually used Susanoo with his newly acquired Manjikyu Sharingan, and even used Heavenly Hemp Ancient Bow, which was not inferior to Yata no Kagami and Tatsuka sword. When the arrow condensed by the dark Amaterasu flame pointed at him, Hoodlum's heart was filled with the satisfaction of controlling others. Put away your Susanoo. Looking at Sasuke, Hoodlum seemed to admit defeat and said softly to Sasuke, you just opened Manjikyu Sharingan. Although you can use Susanoo after reading the scroll without any systematic training, you still need to use it. But now you are using a lot of your eye power at the cost of forcibly using such a move, which will cause great damage to your eyes. Although you and I are not friends, we are far from enemies. You don't need to pay such a price. Hoodlum also stretched out his hand and pointed at Sasuke's eyes. Because using Susanoo at this moment caused a certain degree of burden on his eyes, Sasuke's eyes were bleeding. After hearing Hoodlum's words, Sasuke seemed to stabilize his emotions. He closed his eyes and turned his Manjikyu Sharingan into the original dark color, and the huge Susanoo summoned by Sasuke slowly disappeared without a trace. Hoodlum opened his hand, and a space vortex appeared in Hoodlum's hand, and 4 uniforms representing Akatsuki's black background and red clouds also appeared in Hoodlum's hand. Slowly walking to Sasuke's side, Hoodlum handed the 4 uniforms in his hand to Sasuke, and said to Sasuke, although you belong to the nature of mercenaries after all, you represent our Akatsuki, so you still have to wear these uniforms. Presumably you still have Itachi Uchiha's ring. That ring has a lot of functions and it will also be a tool for us to give you tasks. From today on, Uchiha Sasuke, you will be Akatsuki's new Suzaku. Listening to Hoodlum's words, Sasuke also took out the ring with the word Suzaku written on it, which he took off from Itachi's finger before leaving. Originally he just wanted to use it as a souvenir, but he didn't expect it to have such a use. Chapter 465. After a short conversation with Hoodlum, Sasuke took his 3 teammates to embark on the first mission of becoming Akatsuki's mercenaries. The mission's destination is the very distant Cloud Village in the Land of Lightning. It seems that Sasuke's team is about to face another difficult battle. In the Land of Fire, Woodleaf Village, the sun was still so bright and warm, and every villager's face was filled with joy and happiness. As the highest leader of the village, Yondaime Hokage Watergate was sitting in his office at the moment, discussing this year's Woodleaf Ninja Training Program and the specific adjustment plan of the Woodleaf Medical Ninja Training Program with some of his subordinates. Minato and his subordinates argued and discussed some of the details. Although everyone seemed to be arguing until their faces turned red, everyone could feel the light of hope from them. Because they all knew that their arguments were not meaningless. On the contrary, an idea they put forward now may become Woodleaf's policy for the next year. For those who worked in politics, even a promotion was far less exciting than having one's suggestion adopted and implemented. Just as they were discussing whether to further expand the scope of the Woodleaf Medical Ninja Training Program and expand the recruitment of ninjas from newly graduated genin to some chunin and even jonin, a knock on the door directly interrupted their conversation. Watergate's face was slightly unhappy, his good-looking eyebrows slightly wrinkled together. He stretched out his hand and waved to his subordinates, indicating them to wait for a moment and then continue the discussion. Watergate slowly walked to the door of his office. Putting his hand on the handle of his door and gently turning the door handle, Watergate raised his head and glanced at the person who interrupted the lively discussion at such a moment. But what Watergate didn't expect was that the person who knocked on the door was not a subordinate who brought him office documents, but his teacher, Jiraiya, who officially married Tsunade not long ago. Since it was Jiraiya, Watergate naturally couldn't just put on a sour face, so he tried his best to make his face look better. Watergate welcomed Jiraiya, who was standing at the door, into his office. Some department heads in the office waiting for Watergate's return saw Jiraiya coming in and greeted him very politely. In the face of these Konoha administrators, Jiraiya wasn't so cold. But they were all congratulating him on his marriage, so of course, Jiraiya couldn't lose face like this, so he smiled at them and exchanged a few words in return. Jiraiya and Tsunade just got married a few days ago. At such a time he came to find his disciple. Naturally there should be something important, so Watergate said to his department head, "Everyone please go back first. We will make an appointment later to continue discussing the modification of the plan." These department heads naturally knew that Watergate had something important to say to their teacher, one of the Woodleaf Sannin, Jiraiya, so they were very reasonable. After bidding farewell to Watergate and Jiraiya, they also walked out of Hokage's office one by one. After sending away his subordinates, Watergate closed the door of his office. Walking to Jiraiya's side with a little concern, Watergate said to Jiraiya, "Sensei, why are you here at this time? I thought you and Tsunade-sama were going to enjoy the sweet time of your honeymoon?" Speaking of sweet time, Watergate's eyes suddenly turned, looked at his teacher, and found that Jiraiya was indeed a little old. As the saying goes, 30 is like a wolf, 40 is like a tiger. Counting the time, Tsunade-sama is also at the age of a wolf and a tiger. Is she my sensei? During this time, Watergate also felt a dull pain in his waist after seeing his wife Shina Kushina. After all, everyone is a ninja and their physical fitness is not ordinary. With a little concern, Watergate took Jiraiya's hand and said to his teacher, "Sensei, don't worry. We are all men, I understand. I have a prescription here that I found before. Although I haven't tried it, I heard that the effect is very significant. Would you like me to give you a prescription to try?" Although Watergate didn't say it explicitly, they were all men, and the meaning of Watergate's words was very clear to Jiraiya. Hearing that someone doubted his ability, even if this person was his disciple, Jiraiya was very upset and said to Watergate, No. The pamphlet that Nangongji gave me before is very effective." Halfway through his words, Jiraiya realized that he seemed to be led astray by his disciple, so after a quick cough he said to Watergate with a serious face, "I didn't come here to talk to you about such things. It's really a serious matter, do you understand?" Hearing Jiraiya's words, Watergate also put away the evil thoughts in his heart and sat upright facing Jiraiya. Obviously he was ready to listen to what Jiraiya said. Seeing that Watergate was serious, Jiraiya continued to say to Watergate, "I know that you have been busy with various matters in Woodleaf Village during this time, but I hope you can spare some time and go to Mount Mayaboku with me." Watergate looked at Jiraiya with a little doubt and asked, "Mount Mayaboku? Is there a new prophecy from Totema Sennin?" Watergate naturally knew about Totema Sennin's prophecy ability of Mount Mayaboku, and in Watergate's mind, this was the only reason why Jiraiya mentioned Mount Mayaboku so seriously. But after hearing Watergate's words, Jiraiya slowly shook his head and said to Watergate, "No, Great Totema Sennin is still sleeping. The reason why I'm going to take you to Mount Mayaboku this time is because I think you should learn Mount Mayaboku's secret sage mode. After the last battle with Pain, I thought that Pain might have other abilities to restore the Rikudo-S clones that he had lost. After studying the black stick we brought back, Tsunade also told me that the function of this black stick is actually to conduct chakra. Rikudo-S clones are made of corpses, so it's possible to repair or change a body. With your current strength, it's still a bit difficult to deal with Pain's Rikudo, so in order to protect Woodleaf, I think it's necessary to take you to Mount Mayaboku to practice Sage Mode." Chapter 466. Sage Mode is a state where you can use natural energy. In this state, you can use natural energy to greatly increase physical activity to increase attack power and defense. At the same time, you can use natural energy to increase physical attack range and perception. Such a state is extremely significant for a person's combat power, just like when Jiraiya fought with Pain's Six Paths doppelganger. In Sage Mode, Jiraiya was able to fight with Pain's Six Paths doppelganger, and he destroyed 5 of his doppelgangers. Moreover, Jiraiya didn't hone his Sage Mode to perfection. In Jiraiya's view, Watergate is far better than him in terms of talent and physical fitness. If he really practices Sage Mode, he will be able to succeed in a very short time, and he may even be able to practice the most perfect Sage Mode in history. In order to deal with the future danger, Jiraiya came to Watergate's office and proposed his idea to Watergate. Jiraiya naturally knows how difficult such a proposal is to realize. Even the most ordinary ninja can only get a period of vacation after completing a lot of tasks. As the leader of Woodleaf Village, Watergate has almost no concept of vacation. Even if he accompanied his son Naruto to practice, Watergate still left his shadow clone in his office. Once there is something important, the shadow clone will automatically disappear and inform Watergate to return to the office to deal with official business. If Watergate agrees to Jiraiya's proposal, then it means that Watergate will have to practice in Mount Mayaboku for a few months or even longer. For Watergate, such a period of time is to push away most or even all of his official business. For the leader of Ninja Village, this is unimaginable. Jiraiya is clear about these things and Watergate is naturally more clear about it, so Watergate also slowly rubbed his chin with his hand. In the past few days, Watergate has been dealing with various official business in the Hokage's office, and a little stubble has grown on his chin. The roughness brought by the stubble didn't make Watergate feel uncomfortable. Instead, it made Watergate feel calmer. After weighing the pros and cons in his heart again and again, Watergate seemed to be very entangled whether he should go to Mount Mayaboku with Jiraiya or not. As the Hokage, his duty is to protect the Woodleaf Village. Going to Mount Mayaboku to practice Sage Mode and enhance his strength is naturally a way to protect the Woodleaf Village. However, if he abandoned his official duties at Woodleaf and allowed Woodleaf to get into trouble, wouldn't he be failing his duties even more? Teacher, looking at Jiraiya, Watergate said slowly. After hearing Watergate's slightly heavy tone, Jiraiya's heart slowly sank to the bottom. Yes, after all, Watergate is the Hokage, the leader of Woodleaf Village. It was indeed unimaginable for a person of such status to leave the village that he was determined to protect and go to Mount Mayaboku to cultivate for a few months or even longer. Jiraiya-sensei, I have decided. I hope I can go to Mount Mayaboku to practice Sage Mode. You are right. With my current strength, it is not enough to protect the entire Woodleaf Village. With that, Watergate remembered the masked man who used space ninjutsu when Nine Tails attacked, and the ability of 6 paths of pain that his sensei described to him. It is indeed not enough to rely on his current strength. But, what about Woodleaf? Hearing Watergate say that he wants to go to Mount Mayaboku to practice Sage Mode, Jiraiya was naturally very happy. But Jiraiya still asked his doubts. After all, Woodleaf is also the place that Jiraiya is determined to protect. If Woodleaf is damaged because of reckless actions, Jiraiya will not forgive himself. Don't worry, sensei, I have considered this problem. So I plan to go to Mount Mayaboku alone. I will leave a shadow clone in Woodleaf Village to deal with daily affairs. As long as I don't fight, I think this shadow clone will be enough to last for several months. As for some important affairs, I will entrust Nara Shikaku and my shadow clone to decide together. And some security issues may trouble you and sensei's wife. After all, both of you are strong people in Woodleaf. In case of any emergency, you will be enough to stabilize the situation. If it doesn't work, you can let the Toad of Mount Mayaboku inform me, and I will immediately return to Woodleaf through reverse summoning. Listening to Watergate's words, Jiraiya's hanging heart gradually relaxed. Although this may not be the best plan, it is the best and most practical solution that can be thought of in such a situation. For Watergate's proposal, Jiraiya naturally has no intention to refuse. Well, you go arrange the relevant matters first and we will go to Mount Mayaboku. When we get there, I will explain to Fukasaku Sennin and Shima Sennin, and then I will return to Woodleaf to help you take care of the overall situation. Watergate heard Jiraiya's words and directly made a hand seal to summon a shadow clone. This shadow clone was infused with more than half of Watergate's chakra to maintain the stability of the shadow clone. Then Watergate turned to Jiraiya and said, "We are pressed for time. I know that it takes not only effort to cultivate Sage Mode but also a lot of time. So let's not waste any second. I will let the shadow clone take care of these things. Let's go to Mount Mayaboku now." Although Watergate's tone was very flat, there was still a bit of urgency and tension in it. Now for Watergate, perhaps Sage Mode is the fastest way to increase his strength. Only by grasping such power in his own hands, Watergate can better guard Woodleaf, guard his family and guard his loved ones. Watergate and Jiraiya stood together and made hand seals together. Reverse summoning jutsu was completed in an instant. A cloud of smoke rose, and the figures of Jiraiya and Watergate also disappeared in it. Seeing that his main body had left, Watergate's shadow clone scratched his hair slightly, and seemed to be a little distressed and muttered to himself, "My main body really left me with a big problem. Not to mention how to explain to those old stubborn elders of Kiba, how am I going to explain to Shinakushina? Suddenly leaving the ninja village without saying a word, I will definitely be beaten by Shinakushina, right? I am just a shadow clone. If I am beaten like that, how can I complete my task?" Chapter 467. How Watergate's shadow clone convinced Woodleaf elders and Shinakushina was subconsciously ignored by Watergate, because Watergate and Jiraiya had already arrived at the territory of Mount Mayaboku. For the arrival of Watergate and Jiraiya, the toads of Mount Mayaboku didn't have any special reaction, but after the grown-up toad Kishi and toad dragon pestered Watergate and asked why Naruto didn't come, Watergate and Jiraiya directly met Fukasaku Sannin and Shima Sannin. I didn't expect Jiraiya's stupid mouth to be able to persuade Watergate boy to put down his job as Hokage and come to Mount Mayaboku to practice sage mode. Has there been such a big change after marriage? Looking at Watergate, Fukasaku Sannin said with a little surprise. Shima Sannin and Izurin, who stood next to Fukasaku Sannin, didn't speak, but the look in her eyes was obviously some emotion. Jiraiya was able to persuade Watergate. Fukasaku Sannin and Shima Sannin naturally knew about the marriage of Jiraiya and Tsunade. Even when Jiraiya got married, Fukasaku Sannin and Shima Sannin also brought some local specialties from Mount Mayaboku, various types of insects to congratulate them. Jiraiya, who stood on Watergate's side and didn't speak, also became a little gray after experiencing the double blow of Fukasaku Sannin and Shima Sannin. Ignoring Jiraiya's reaction, Fukasaku Sannin looked at Watergate and said, "Presumably Jiraiya has probably told Watergate boy what sage mode is before, right?" Hearing Fukasaku Sannin's question, Watergate, who was about to appease his sensei, also quickly said to Fukasaku Sannin, "Yes, I already know that sage mode absorbs the free natural energy in the air and mixes it with your own physical energy and spiritual power to create a special chakra called Senjutsu chakra. Through this special chakra, a person's physical fitness and ninjutsu ability can be greatly enhanced." There was nothing wrong with Watergate's words, so Fukasaku Sannin also touched the beard on his chin and said to Watergate with a little relief, "Indeed, everything about sage mode is based on Senjutsu chakra. But there are also many hidden dangers in sage mode. After all, the natural energy in the air is not a gentle thing. On the contrary, if you're carelessness, the natural energy can may riot. For so many years, the only person I've seen who can tame the violent natural energy is the kid who cultivated the internal force that Jiraiya brought to Mount Mayaboku." Ha ha. Listening to Fukasaku Sannin's words, Watergate's face also changed slightly. The Sannin. It seems that Fukasaku Sannin is talking about Nangongja, who has been wandering outside his control in Woodleaf Village. And listening to Fukasaku Sannin's tone, it seems that Nangongja learned to control and even tame natural energy a long time ago. Watergate glanced at his sensei with a little reproach. He seemed to be complaining that his sensei didn't tell him such important information. Jiraiya, on the other hand, recovered from the grayish state and looked at Minato innocently. He seemed to want to tell Minato that he was the one who didn't ask him but blamed him for not telling him. Before he had time to communicate with Jiraiya, Fukasaku Sannin continued to talk, so Watergate could only focus his mind on Fukasaku Sannin's words. Violent natural energy will greatly affect the human body. At the beginning of the violent natural energy, the human body will greatly transform into a toad. When the body completely transforms into a toad, the human will transform into a stone toad. You should have seen a lot of giant stone toads on your way here, right? Those are not decorations of our Mount Mayaboku, but the appearance of people who failed to cultivate sage mode in the long history. Jiraiya's sage mode is like an unfinished product. It can be said that it has surpassed most of the contractors of Mount Mayaboku who succeeded in cultivating sage mode. Watergate, are you ready to put your life on the balance and get sage mode? Fukasaku Sannin's words were very serious. Obviously he was not joking with Watergate. But such a danger did not make Watergate feel the slightest fear. As a ninja, Watergate has long been ready to put his life on the line. And for Watergate, cultivating sage mode is not only a means to improve his strength, but also a necessary means to better protect the Woodleaf, protect his family and protect everything he cherishes. I'm ready. Even if there is a big chance that I will fail, I still have to learn sage mode. I need immortal mode, my family needs immortal mode, my village needs immortal mode. As the Hokage of the Woodleaf, isn't it too incompetent to retreat from such a risk? Watergate said this sentence and he couldn't help but think of the first Hokage, second Hokage, and 3 generations Hokage who sacrificed their lives for the Woodleaf. After these 3 Hokages, Watergate also thought of the people who fought with Watergate or sacrificed their lives for the Woodleaf. These people all looked at him with a kind of expectation, encouraging him. How can he retreat like this? His firm eyes were also seen by Fukasaku Sannin and Shima Sannin. Watergate's eyes were not filled with ambition or a blind pursuit of power, but with the persistence of responsibility and the cherishing of cherished things. Only people with such beliefs are the most likely to succeed in cultivating sage mode. In this case, Fukasaku Sannin and Shima Sannin had no more questions, because Watergate's eyes were already the best answer. Taking Watergate to the edge of the pool where the toad oil was flowing, Fukasaku Sanin put the toad oil on Watergate's forehead, and the sage mode cultivation officially began. When Jiraiya saw that Watergate had entered the sage mode cultivation under the care of Fukasaku Sanin and Shima Sanin, he also nodded to Fukasaku Sanin and Shima Sanin as a greeting, and directly left Mount Mayaboku and returned to the Woodleaf village. Watergate entrusted the task of guarding the Woodleaf to Jiraiya. As the fourth Hokage's master, Jiraiya can't discredit his disciple. Chapter 468. After leaving Mount Mayaboku, Jiraiya has been looking forward to it. The great Toad Sage once prophesied that one of his disciples will become the Son of War, and the other will become the Son of Hope that will lead the ninja world to peace. Now it seems that the candidates of these two people may be completely determined. The Son of War is the one who had been with him for 3 years in the Rain Country, Nagato, and the Son of Hope may be this Woodleaf fourth Hokage, Namikaze Watergate. In Amigate Cure, Nagato, who was regarded by Jiraiya as the Son of War, was also looking at Pain's Six Paths clone standing in front of him with a serious face. After the last battle with his sensei, Jiraiya, 5 of his Six Paths clone were directly damaged, and almost all of them were damaged to varying degrees except for Jigakudo. After emergency repair during this period of time, except for Chikishodo, which was attacked by Jiraiya's Senjutsu Katan, which was completely destroyed, the other Six Paths clone were repaired. But at this moment, Nagato didn't have the mind to check the state of his Six Paths clone after the repair. Instead, he frowned as if thinking about something. During the time when he was concentrating on repairing his Six Paths clone, Conan also brought him some of the latest developments in the ninja world from time to time, as well as the movements of the masked man Hoodlum who claimed to be Uchiha Madara. When he heard that Itachi Uchiha died, Uchiha Sasuke joined the Akatsuki as a mercenary, and was sent to capture the Hachibi column force of Kumo Shinobu village. Nagato's heart was filled with anger. This guy was really too excessive. Akatsuki organization was his own organization and not Hoodlum's organization. Casually sending his own members to their deaths and unscrupulously giving orders to the members of his organization, in the end who gave Hoodlum this kind of authority? As the leader of an organization, the most unacceptable thing is to have someone challenge his position, even if this person is the one who led him step by step out of the Akatsuki's weak predicament. I heard that you were looking for me? In Nagato's room, a space vortex suddenly formed, and Hoodlum's figure slowly walked out of it. Of course, Hoodlum wasn't the only one who walked out. There was also a strange person whose face was wrapped in a huge pitcher plant. His face was half black and half white. Seeing Zetsu and Hoodlum appear together, Nagato wasn't surprised. After all, Hoodlum was the one who brought Zetsu to the organization. Although Zetsu's ability was very good and very useful for the organization, Nagato never regarded him as his confidant. Weren't Hoodlum and Hoodlum the same kind of people? That's right. I was indeed looking for you mainly because I wanted to ask you a question. Nagato's tone was cold, but Hoodlum and Zetsu didn't seem to notice it. Hoodlum grinned and said to Nagato, "Oh? Our Akatsuki's god unexpectedly has a question to consult me. This really makes me flattered. Please tell me, I will answer you one by one." Obviously, these words were very gentlemanly, but when they came out of Hoodlum's mouth, they sounded full of sarcasm. Obviously, he called Nagato as God, but in his words, he regarded himself as the one who dominated the so-called God. Hearing Hoodlum's words, Nagato's originally cold face slowly faded, and a soft laughter came out of his mouth. He suddenly raised his head and stared at Hoodlum's mask with his Rinnegan full of circles and said, "What I want to ask is actually a very simple question. Is this Akatsuki organization mine, or is it Hoodlum's organization?" When Nagato shouted such a sentence, the Six Paths doppelgangers standing beside Nagato immediately moved, firmly surrounding Hoodlum and Zetsu. Pairs of ruthless and indifferent eyes swept past every vital point of Hoodlum and Hoodlum's body. It seemed that as long as Nagato willed it, the Six Paths doppelgangers would rush up and fight Hoodlum and Zetsu without fear of death. Hoodlum and Zetsu didn't care about the Six Path clones. What really made Hoodlum and Zetsu feel the danger was the skinny Nagato in front of them. As an outer path, Nagato was actually more dangerous than the Six Path clones. Obviously, Hoodlum was ready to fight, but he didn't look nervous at all. On the contrary, he was still so playful and still so calm. "Nagato, what you said is wrong. During this time, you have been repairing your Six Path clones. Although you can still get some necessary information, the situation of the Akatsuki isn't that simple. However, the situation in the shinobi world isn't something that can be explained with just a few pieces of information. Naturally, I can't disturb your progress in repairing the Six Paths clone, so I can only follow the strategy we made before. Now that you have recovered your strength, it's naturally not my turn to give orders. My leader, I don't know what your next plan is. Nagato's eyes were still coldly looking at Hoodlum standing in front of him. Looking at Hoodlum pretending to be a clown, Nagato's eyes flashed with killing intent. But soon his killing intent was forcibly suppressed by Nagato, because after Akatsuki's members died one after another, Akatsuki's high-end combat power was actually a bit lacking. If Zetsu and Hoodlum were left here, Akatsuki would only have himself, Konan, and Kisame. Even if Sasuke and Snake Squad were counted as mercenaries, it would be far from enough to complete his plan. Hoodlum was actually using the general trend and his obsession to complete the plan to create a kind of coercion, a coercion that he had to tolerate. Slowly waving his hand to let Six Path clones retreat, Nagato glanced at Hoodlum with his Rinnegan, and said with a slightly cold tone, "Since you have sent Uchiha and Sasuke to capture Hachibi, then I will go to the Woodleaf to meet Nine Tails Column Force. If everything goes well, I think our plan will be completed soon." Hearing that Nagato was going to the Woodleaf, Hoodlum also slowly took a step forward and said to Nagato, "The Woodleaf is different from other places, it's not so easy to invade. Now there are 4 Kage-level powerhouses in the Woodleaf: Watergate, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Nangongja. We must not underestimate them. Let me and Konan accompany you to capture Nine Tails Column Force." Chapter 469. "Yonyu guys, you suddenly appeared. Hurry up and retreat, I'll let you go." Oyang. Looking at Sasuke and the other 3 members of the Snake team who suddenly appeared in front of him, Killer Bee looked at Sasuke's group of 4 vigilantly. Although he said that as long as Sasuke's group retreated, he would let them go, but as a ninja, Killer Bee was still instinctively ready to fight. Before coming here to intercept Killer Bee, Sasuke's group also did some homework on Killer Bee's temperament. Although they knew that Killer Bee usually spoke with a sense of rap, when they really faced Killer Bee, they could really understand how noisy and unpleasant Killer Bee's rap was. "Retreat? Of course we will retreat, but we will take you with us." Suigetsu looked at Killer Bee, his eyes full of determination, but there was still some worry in Suigetsu's eyes. Although Suigetsu thinks that the strength of his group is very strong, his enemy is also not a weak guy. This is Hachibi Column Force, ranked 2nd among the 9-tailed beasts. And according to the information collected during this time, it is not difficult to know that Killer Bee is a ninja who can perfectly control his power as Hachibi Column Force. Such a person is not so easy to deal with, is he? After hearing Shueiyue's words, Killer Bee's expression turned solemn. Although Killer Bee didn't know these ninjas who suddenly appeared on the road to intercept him, the uniforms on their bodies were enough to make Killer Bee serious. "You know, another Hachibi Column Force of Kumo Shinobu Village, Nibi Column Force Yujito Nibi, was forcibly abducted by Akatsuki not long ago, and her life and death are still unknown. Judging from all the information collected, Akatsuki is working hard to collect Bijou, so Yujito Nibi is naturally in danger. Although the tailed beast inside Yukito's body is only Nibi, but its strength is also quite good. Such a ninja was captured by Akatsuki's people without any resistance. It is enough to see how difficult Akatsuki's people are. Moreover, he is Hachibi Column Force. As long as Akatsuki is not confused, they will definitely send more powerful forces to surround him." "Yo, you bastards, you idiots. I just came out for a walk, but I accidentally had to fight. Although I don't like it very much, I will do my best. Open your eyes carefully and look at my light." Oyang. Since the other party was ready to fight, Killer Bee did not hesitate at all. He immediately made up his mind to open up a path of blood. From the moment he was surrounded, Killer Bee has been carefully observing the 4 ninjas opposite him. And Hachibi in Killer Bee's body is also constantly perceiving the foundation of the enemy opposite him through his ability. Although he doesn't know what ability these enemies have, chakra, which is obviously different from ordinary people, has already told Killer Bee and Hachibi that the 4 people opposite him all have Kekkei Genkai. In the ninja world, although there are strong and weak Kekkei Genkai, ninjas who can cultivate to Jonin or even more powerful level must be people who have mastered the power in their body. Even if their Kekkei Genkai is very weak, under the continuous accumulation of combat awareness and combat experience, no matter how weak and useless their Kekkei Genkai is, they can't ignore it. Otherwise they will definitely suffer a big loss. This is one of the experiences that Killer Bee has obtained after almost completely experiencing the Third Ninja World War and completing countless difficult tasks. The moment they saw Killer Bee pull out his sword, Yugo and Kuroto also acted. Yugo's body was instantly covered with black runes, and the natural energy that filled the natural world constantly poured into Yugo's body. The violent killing intent instantly filled Yugo's spiritual world. His originally dull face has become ferocious at this moment, and a cold and uncomfortable aura slowly rose from Yugo's body. With a slight struggle in his eyes, Yugo looked back at Sasuke standing beside him, and Sasuke also looked at Yugo quietly. Even though he didn't say anything, Zhongwu's discomfort from the intense killing intent that was assaulting his nerves slowly disappeared. Yugo's left arm began to change constantly, and huge barbs appeared on Yugo's arm. A primitive aura, as if from ancient times, gushed out from Yugo's body. If you must find a word to describe Yugo at this moment, perhaps only power is the most appropriate word. Is the most simple feeling of power. Crystal release, crystal shuriken. After seeing that Yugo had controlled his killing intent, Kuroto also quickly formed hand seals with a tacit understanding. Pink crystals were constantly produced. Under Kuroto's control, the shuriken-like crystals rushed towards Killer Bee at an extremely fast speed. Sure enough, he's the holder of Kekkei Genkai. After seeing the changes in Yugo's body and Kuroto's special ability, Killer Bee also confirmed his judgment. One is a Kekkei Genkai that acts on the body, and the other is a Kekkei Genkai that acts on the release technique? Be careful. That kid whose body has changed is not simple. I smell a trace of Senin's aura on him. Hachibi, who was sealed in Killer Bee's body, reminded Killer Bee in a timely manner. Hachibi, who once lived with Hagoromo Sannin, knew how powerful Sannin chakra is better than anyone else. Yo, don't worry at all, I'm ready. Sit quietly by the side and watch me shine. Oyang. Even though he was talking to the Hachibi in his body, Killer Bee still spoke in a strange tone. And Hachibi seems to be used to Column Force's personality. Although there was a bit of helplessness on his face, he didn't do anything special. Waving the ninja sword in his hand, Killer Bee easily split and blocked the shuriken that was shot towards him one by one. Immediately after Kuroto's shuriken, Yugo was very close to Killer Bee's side. Yugo's timing was very good. Killer Bee, who was holding two swords, had just blocked the last two shuriken, and there was a little gap in his body. The punch that Zhongwu had been accumulating power for a long time was thrown out, and judging from the wind and the sound of friction between the fist and the air, this punch was definitely not easy to receive. Chapter 470. But Killer Bee isn't a person who only uses two swords. When he found that he couldn't use his hands to defend himself, Killer Bee immediately used his chakra to activate a seal on his ankle. The moment the seal was activated, a long sword suddenly appeared next to his ankle. He used the tip of his foot to gently lift the hilt of the long saber. With sharp eyes and agile hands, he clamped the long saber between his leg socket. He injected the Raitan chakra from his body into the long blade that was clamped between his legs. The long blade constantly moved around the lightning chakra, and at the same time the long blade also began to vibrate at a high frequency. Lightning ninjutsu, supersonic thunder vibration release. The leg that wasn't holding the saber suddenly exerted force. Killer Bee's entire body assumed a strange posture as he rushed towards Yugo, who was clearly attacking him. Originally, Red Lotus saw Killer Bee summon the long sword, and also seemed to use a powerful ninjutsu. Red Lotus, who was preparing to use crystal release to harass Killer Bee, quickly stopped making hand seals. After all, she was now mainly a long-range attacker, and most of the ninjutsu she used were AoE ninjutsu. With the current distance between Killer Bee and Yugo, Red Lotus knew that Yugo would be affected, so she didn't dare to make a move. Although Red Lotus usually doesn't respect her teammates when she talks to them, it's just her personality. In fact, Red Lotus still cherishes her teammates very much. It's because of this that Killer Bee was given a chance. Under the influence of inertia, Yugo had no way of changing the direction of his punch. He could only use his deformed left fist to smash directly into the lightning saber. Supersonic thunder vibration release uses the power of lightning release to act on the long sword, so the long sword has the ability to paralyze lightning and also has a strong cutting ability. However, because Killer Bee used the blade of his long sword to block Yugo's punch, it played a certain defensive role. The lightning on the long sword invaded Yugo's body the moment it touched him. Because the amount of lightning was too large, it directly began to destroy the muscle tissue and tendons of Yugo's left arm. So Yugo couldn't increase the power of his fist by releasing more chakra. The huge power that originally carried by the fist was constantly reduced under the high-frequency vibration of the long sword, and the power that really affected the long sword in Killer Bee's body has been greatly reduced. Perceiving that Yugo's body has gradually adapted to the paralysis caused by the lightning, Killer Bee directly raised his leg and threw the long sword in the air, then he bit the handle of the sword with his mouth, and used his leg to kick Yugo's body fiercely, directly pulling away from Yugo. Releasing lightning release chakra from his leg socket actually has a certain degree of pressure on Killer Bee's mind and body. Just like now, after Killer Bee stood still, his left leg, which was originally holding the long sword, trembled slightly. Just when Killer Bee was about to adjust his state and launch another attack, a thick fog was quietly produced. Water release, mist concealment technique. The place where Sasuke's team intercepted Killer Bee was relatively near a relatively high mountain, so there was a little fog due to the high altitude. Under the combined effect of the natural fog and the fog produced after the use of mist concealment technique, the mist concealment technique used by Suigetsu became more difficult to see through. After Killer Bee noticed that he was shrouded in the mist concealment technique, he also took out all his 7 long swords very cautiously. There were 2 long swords under his armpit and arm socket respectively, a long sword in his mouth, a long sword in his abdomen and a long sword in his leg socket. Obviously, Killer Bee also became more cautious after experiencing the attack of Red Lotus and Yugo. Although he was wearing sunglasses, his constantly turning head clearly showed Killer Bee's serious attitude. Suigetsu's brother, Hozuki Mangetsu, was not only the user of the double sword of the Mist 7 swords, but also the user of the other 6 swords. Although Hozuki Mangetsu was dead, he left some of his methods of using the remaining 6 swords, so he also mentioned the method of using the broken sword, Zanpakuto. Suigetsu's figure has quietly appeared behind Killer Bee, the Zanpakuto was raised high, and was about to slash down on Killer Bee, but Killer Bee still didn't notice. Suigetsu's face slowly showed a smile, but Sasuke, who stood aside and didn't participate in the battle, began to slowly mobilize chakra in his body. Sasuke had seen Zabuza, the original Zanpakuto wielder, use silent assassination jutsu, so it was very easy to discover the shortcomings of Suigetsu's slightly shoddy assassination jutsu. For Killer Bee Hachibi column force, Sasuke was still full of vigilance, so Sasuke mobilized his chakra at this moment to save Suigetsu if something went wrong. Sure enough, just when the Zanpakuto was about to attack Killer Bee's face with his back to Suigetsu showed a smile of success. Killer Bee's perception ability was indeed not very strong, but there was a Hachibi in Killer Bee's body that could be said to be born from chakra. Although he used silent assassination jutsu, Suigetsu didn't perfectly hide his chakra aura. At the moment when Suigetsu approached Killer Bee, Hachibi had already informed his man column force. Although it seems that Killer Bee is a careless person, we can't completely ignore Killer Bee's combat experience. He is now in a 1 versus 4 situation. As long as the other party is ready to start fighting with him, then the probability of Killer Bee's defeat is still very high. Therefore for Killer Bee there are only 2 choices. Either he tries his best to break through the encirclement of Sasuke's team and escape smoothly, or he concentrates his strength and starts to defeat the members of Sasuke's team one by one. Obviously, Killer Bee, who has his own pride, didn't choose the first option, escape, but began to look for opportunities to defeat the members of Sasuke's team one by one. And Suigetsu, who was already standing behind him and was discovered by him, isn't he the best target? Chapter 471. The powerful and violent Bijou Chakra instantly covered Killer Bee's body, and under the joint control of Killer Bee and Hachibi, Killer Bee's body did not transform into Naruto's Yanbi mode. Killer Bee's body was now only partially Bijou, and the Bijou transformation was very complete. A huge octopus tentacle rushed out from behind Killer Bee. Suigetsu, who couldn't react in time, was directly wrapped in the huge octopus tentacle, struggling hard but to no avail. Killer Bee could naturally perceive that his octopus tentacle had captured the target, so lightning surged all over his body, stimulating his physical ability through lightning. Raitun Ninjutsu, Baron Egret Blade. The original Baron Egret Blade was a pure blade technique without using Bijou Chakra and Raitun Chakra to stimulate the body to enhance the power, but in order to speed up the battle process, Killer Bee used Bijou mode and Raitun Chakra on his blade technique at the same time. The 7 blades that Killer Bee used at that time were now ready to attack. After a slight accumulation of power, the 7 blades on Killer Bee's body moved at the same time. Without removing the huge octopus tentacle wrapped around Suigetsu, the blade light directly slashed on the octopus tentacle, but there was no stagnation after being hindered at all. The huge octopus tentacle condensed by Hachibi's Bijou Chakra was so fragile under Killer Bee's blade light. After a dozen or 20 slashes, Shueyu, who had been trapped in the octopus tentacles and seemed to be unable to move, suddenly turned into a pool of water and escaped through the gaps of the octopus tentacles. What Suigetsu used was the Kekkei Genkai of Hozuki clan. Seeing that Suigetsu had escaped from the bondage, Sasuke not only did not stop the chakra in his body, but also quickly printed. A ninjutsu was quickly completed in Sasuke's hand, and he held his hand in front of his mouth. Katan, Dragon Fire Jutsu. A B-class ninjutsu was released by Sasuke, but it was not launched toward Killer Bee but flew toward the sky. Suigetsu, Red Lotus, and Yugo immediately moved after discovering that Sasuke used fire release ninjutsu towards the sky. Suigetsu quickly lifted the mist concealment jutsu he just cast, and Yugo quickly distanced himself from Killer Bee. Looking at Killer Bee, Red Lotus quickly formed hand seals, and a ninjutsu was completed in an instant. Crystal Release, 8 Crystal Walls Formation. Huge pink crystal pillars stretched out from the ground. A total of 8 crystal pillars trapped Killer Bee in the middle. Killer Bee, who had just used his octopus tentacles to trap others, was now trapped by someone else. When he found that he was trapped, and Sasuke's 3 companions also distanced themselves from him one by one, Killer Bee's heart inevitably felt a sense of crisis. The strong sense of crisis made Killer Bee immediately begin to communicate with Hachibi in his body. A large number of Bijou chakra was released by Hachibi, and Killer Bee's body gradually began to deform. One tail after another emerged from Killer Bee's back. 1 tail, 2 tails, 3 tails, 6 tails. With the continuous release of the Bijou's chakra, Killer Bee's body slowly swelled up. Cracks also began to slowly appear on the crystal walls of 8 Crystal Walls Formation. The hastily used 8 Crystal Walls Formation was slowly overwhelmed under the impact of Column Force, who had released Rokubi mode. Red Lotus was naturally the person who knew the state of the crystal walls. With a little anxiety and tension, Red Lotus looked at Sasuke. Sasuke didn't have any intention to respond to Red Lotus's gaze at this moment. His eyes, which had become 3 Tomo state, stared at the huge black cloud formed in the sky with constant electric currents surging in it. His hand quickly printed, and the highly compressed lightning chakra was formed in Sasuke's hand. He stabbed the lightning in his hand into the black thundercloud in the sky in the form of Chidori Einherjar. Because of the stimulation of the external lightning, the lightning in the black thundercloud became more violent. Feeling the changes in the thundercloud, Sasuke's eyes finally turned to Killer Bee's Bijou state, who was about to struggle out of the crystal wall. Divine Beast Patrol Kamui Descend. Raiten, Kirin? That's right, after seeing Nangong's summoned Beast Ryo's appearance in the sky, Sasuke developed a ninjutsu that used huge lightning power to attack the enemy. After this period of practice and research, Sasuke finally displayed the most powerful ninjutsu he could master now. Under the guidance of Chidori Einherjar, the lightning in the black thundercloud was drawn out. A slightly abstract Kirin stood in the air, just like what Sasuke said just now. Divine Beast Patrol Kamui Descend. The Chilant's eyes swept across everyone on the ground mercilessly, as if a real mythical beast had descended upon them. Finally, Kirin put his eyes on Killer Bee, who was constantly releasing Bijou chakra to break free from the crystal wall. A trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. It was strange that chakra and lightning condensed, but its eyes had emotions. Tear it apart, Kirin. Sasuke waved his hand fiercely, and as if he had received an order, Kirin jumped high. It rushed in the direction of Killer Bee like a predator. Although it was huge, it was extremely fast. Kirin almost hit Killer Bee's body in an instant. Whether it was the crystal wall that trapped Killer Bee or Killer Bee itself, they were directly submerged in the sea of lightning. Thunder and lightning continued to wreak havoc on the ground, and the ground was scorched black under the effect of the thunder and lightning. The thunderstorm-like scene lasted for nearly 10 minutes. No matter what kind of life it was, it would be difficult to survive such an attack, right? Feeling that the time was almost up, Sasuke also slowly dispersed the Chidori sharp spear in his hand. Although casting Kirin mainly relied on the natural lightning in nature, Sasuke still needed to consume a lot of energy to control Kirin's attack range. After 10 minutes, Sasuke's chakra was almost exhausted. When Sasuke withdrew the lightning, a feeling of weakness swept through Sasuke's body. Chapter 472. Seeing that Sasuke was obviously exhausted, Red Lotus and Yugo hurriedly wanted to run to Sasuke's side to support him. But Sasuke stopped his teammates' actions with a look. After all, it was still impossible to judge whether the enemy really lost his ability to move. So everything must be done with the mission. Red Lotus and Yugo naturally had a tacit understanding with Sasuke. They knew that Sasuke didn't want to be supported, so they had to slowly advance in the direction of Killer Bee with Suigetsu in a triangular state. All three of them maintained a vigilant state. After all, Column Force was different from ordinary ninja. After such an attack, ordinary ninja must have lost the ability to resist, but Column Force had resistance and recovery ability far beyond ordinary people. Now is not the time to take it lightly. Slowly approaching the position where Killer Bee was standing, Suigetsu, Yugo, and Red Lotus movements also became slower and slower. Without Sasuke's support, Killer Bee could only rely on the three of them if he still had the power to resist. In such a case, no matter how cautious they were, it was not too much. They exchanged glances with each other, and the three of them were finally less than half a meter away from Killer Bee's direction. Killer Bee's current state looked extremely miserable. There were many traces of being burned by lightning on his dark skin. Because of the Bijou transformation, Killer Bee's skin also showed an extremely strange dark red color. Water release, water iron cannon, second ding. Suigetsu pinched his hand into a gun shape, and a small group of water iron cannon was condensing on his two index fingers. Feeling that the water pressure had reached a certain limit, Suigetsu controlled the small water iron cannon at his fingertips to shoot at Killer Bee's body. Just after the water iron cannon at his fingertips was shot out, two more water iron cannon condensed between Suigetsu's fingers. Almost continuously, Shueiwa had already shot out 6 water iron cannons. 2 hit Killer Bee's shoulder, 2 hit Killer Bee's crotch, and 2 hit Killer Bee's knee. The water iron cannon became extremely penetrating due to Suigetsu's accumulation, and it almost instantly penetrated Killer Bee's body on the ground. Looking at his two teammates, Water Moon nodded, indicating that his teammate Killer Bee has lost the ability to resist. So Red Lotus's hand began to form hand seals, and a half-sealing technique and half-ninjutsu was quickly completed. In order to increase the power and hardness of the ninjutsu she cast, Kuroto used almost 3 times the amount of chakra she would normally use to cast such ninjutsu. Crystal Escape, Red Fruit, Change. It was originally a ninjutsu used for self-defense, but under the deliberate control of Red Lotus, it became a ninjutsu with internal defense far stronger than external defense. Killer Bee's body was firmly sealed in the pink crystal. Yugo took out a sealing scroll that he had prepared beforehand. Killer Bee's body, which had become even larger after being wrapped in the red fruit, was sealed within the scroll. After finishing all the operations, Red Lotus, Yugo, and Suigetsu finally came to Sasuke, who was almost sitting on the ground. Although they didn't say anything, the concern in their eyes was so obvious. Mission completed. It's time for us to go back. Using the long sword in his hand as a support point, Sasuke stood up with a little difficulty. Looking at the scroll in Yugo's hand, Sasuke nodded and issued his order. Turning around, Sasuke was just about to leave, but Suigetsu stopped in front of Sasuke, looking like he had something to say but didn't know how to say it. For his teammates, Sasuke has already regarded them as people he needs to cherish, so when he saw Suigetsu's hesitant look, Sasuke was not unhappy, but he said to Suigetsu with a little doubt, "What are you talking about? What's wrong, Suigetsu? Do you have something to say?" Hearing Sasuke's question, Suigetsu could only take a deep breath as if to stabilize his emotions and said to Sasuke, "Is what we are doing right now really right?" Very unusually, Suigetsu didn't show his usual rascal look this time, but looked at Sasuke with some seriousness. Obviously, this question has been in Suigetsu's heart for a long time. Before meeting with Hoodlum, Sasuke said to his 3 teammates that joining Akatsuki this time was actually to explore Akatsuki's intelligence as much as possible, and then find a way to destroy Akatsuki's plan. Originally, they thought that although they seemed to be dealing with Hachibi Column Force this time, as long as they didn't put in any effort, it would be better to make the appearance of defeat more realistic. On the one hand, this can save their own lives, and on the other hand, it can also be regarded as an indirect hindrance to Akatsuki's plan. But in the heat of the battle, Sasuke directly used his strongest ninjutsu. In this case, Red Lotus, Yugo, and Suigetsu couldn't go easy on them. After a battle, they actually caught Hachibi Column Force. Although they don't know how many Bijou has been collected by Akatsuki, now that they have set their sights on the powerful Hachibi, doesn't it prove that Akatsuki has actually collected a lot of Bijou? Their current behavior doesn't seem to be hindering Akatsuki's plan at all. Instead, it feels like they are helping the evildoers. Hearing Suigetsu's words, Sasuke naturally couldn't pretend that he didn't hear it. So after clearing his throat a little and adjusting his thoughts, Sasuke asked Suigetsu, "What do you think?" "Suigetsu, let's not talk about whether what we are doing now is helping the evildoers. I want to ask you a question first. What kind of people do you think Akatsuki's people are? Although Suigetsu had some doubts, since it was a question asked by Sasuke, Suigetsu naturally couldn't ignore it directly. So Suigetsu could only search for all the information he knew about Akatsuki, carefully thinking about Sasuke's question, and then said to Sasuke, "They are a group of lunatics with powerful strength and paranoid thinking." Trying hard to compare the information he knew with the vocabulary in his mind, Suigetsu found that it seems that only lunatics are suitable for Akatsuki's members. Isn't it a group of lunatics who attempt to subvert the ninja world and make the ninja world break out the largest battle? Indeed, they are a group of lunatics. Hearing Suigetsu's words, Sasuke slowly nodded, but then turned to Suigetsu and said, "But they are not only a group of lunatics, such a group of lunatics is not only powerful but also ruthless. So they also have intelligence beyond ordinary people. If we don't work hard, if we perfunctorily perform the task they give us, do you think they won't find out with their intelligence? These people's goal is the nine-tailed beast. Even if we really help them collect the eight-tailed beast, so what? As long as the last-tailed beast is missing, their plan will not be successful. And nine tails, I believe they will have no way to get it." For some reason, when talking about nine tails, Sasuke's eyes suddenly flashed with a ray of confidence. Sasuke believes in Woodleaf, believes in Nangongje, and believes in the blonde boy who has the most dazzling smile since childhood. Chapter 473. Ah! What the hell is this? Jiraiya looked at the 3-centimeter thick stack of documents in his hand. The veins on his face were bulging. It looked like he wanted to tear the documents in his hand into pieces. However, Jiraiya didn't dare to tear this document to shreds as he thought, because this document involved many conflicts between clans in Konoha, big and small. These things need to be coordinated by Hokage. Now that Watergate is practicing Sage Mode in Mount Myaboku, and the qualifications of the Shadow Clone Jutsu and Nara Shikaku are not enough to convince these conservative clans. This kind of thing can only fall on Jiraiya and Tsunade. Such a thing involving all kinds of interests is like a mess in front of Jiraiya, and his wife Tsunade is dealing with another thing with Shizen, so when Jiraiya just got the document he didn't ask Tsunade to help him look at it. Finally, he couldn't hold back the anxiety in his heart and shouted at the ceiling. Shizen raised her head and looked at Jiraiya, who was roaring towards the sky. She took out a small notebook from her arms and gently drew an ink mark on it. Looking at the small notebook in Shizen's hand, it's not difficult to see that there are several pages of densely drawn letters on it. Obviously, as long as Jiraiya has such an uncontrollable emotion, it will be recorded by Shizen. Maybe this is something Shizen does to comfort him when he's bored. Hearing Jiraiya's wail, Tsunade can only put down the document in her hand and slowly walk to Jiraiya's side. She skillfully took the document in Jiraiya's hand, used a pen in her hand to slightly organize the information inside from time to time, and then returned the document in her hand to Jiraiya. Tsunade has watched her two grandfathers deal with public affairs since she was a child, and when she grew up she would occasionally help her teacher, 3 generations Hokage, deal with some less important public affairs. Tsunade was actually very clear about the process. Although dealing with the affairs of Woodleaf Village like this was a little more difficult for Tsunade, it was still within her ability. I really admire Watergate. He can deal with such bullshit things one by one patiently. Shaking the document in his hand, Jiraiya said to Tsunade with a little admiration. After hearing Jiraiya's sigh, Tsunade also nodded. Indeed, being the Hokage is not only an honor but also an important duty. Woodleaf Village needs the Hokage's help to solve all the big and small matters, so in fact after becoming the Hokage, it is no different from contributing everything to the Woodleaf Village. If you don't really sit in the position of Hokage, you can't understand how heavy the responsibility of such a title is. Speaking of this, Tsunade couldn't help but think of her grandfather who died young, her second grandfather who died in the war, and her teacher. These people are worthy of the respect of every Woodleaf ninja and civilians. In order to maintain the current stability of Woodleaf, there are countless people, whether in the light or in the dark, sacrificing their blood and their lives. Just as Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Shizen sighed together about the duties and obligations of Hokage, a figure quietly appeared in the sky of Woodleaf. Wearing the uniform of the Akatsuki with a black background and red clouds, Pain, with orange hair, was overlooking the panoramic view of Woodleaf like a god at the moment. With Rinnegan, Pain's vision was naturally very strong. Although he was high in the sky, the scene inside Woodleaf could still be seen very clearly. The pedestrians and ninjas coming and going in the streets of Woodleaf naturally had no way to find a powerful ninja with sage eyes suddenly appeared above their heads. They were still busy with their own things. But these people all had something in common. Their faces were filled with happy smiles. They were happy that they lived in Woodleaf, and they were happy that they could fight for their dreams. Woodleaf. Pain looked at Woodleaf. Although his eyes were cold, there was a hint of hope and envy. In the war-filled ninja world, only Woodleaf can maintain such peace and calmness. Such a life is worthy of envy, but the people who have such a life also have to bear the same sin. It is a sin to enjoy such a life alone. I, Pain, as a god walking in the world, judge you guilty. Pain slowly opened his hands, and chakra continued to condense in Pain's hands. A little black halo slowly formed in Pain's palms. If Jiraiya was here, he would definitely find that Pain was using his unique ability called Shinra Tensei at this moment. But at this moment, the chakra condensed in Pain's body was far more powerful than the Shinra Tensei that Jiraiya had experienced before. Now, the large number of chakra condensed in Pain's hands has proved that this Shinra Tensei will have far more power than before. Konoha has a defensive enchantment around it. As a village's guard enchantment, Konoha's enchantment naturally has various functions, and the detection of chakra is naturally one of the functions that can't be ignored. When Pain was suspended in the sky because the amount of chakra used was very small, it was difficult to detect. But when Pain began to gather power for his Shinra Tensei, Woodleaf's barrier squad immediately discovered the abnormality in the sky above the Woodleaf. According to the barrier squad's rules, such a powerful source of chakra suddenly appeared near the Woodleaf must be directly transmitted to the Hokage's office unconditionally. So when Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Shizune had been dealing with official business, an Umbu directly under Watergate appeared directly in the Hokage's office. Reporting to several lords, a huge energy source appeared above the Woodleaf. The barrier squad requests to immediately send Summon Beast and Ninja to investigate. Hearing the words of the Umbu, Jiraiya also immediately focused on detecting the huge energy source in the mouth of the Umbu. The familiar aura of chakra directly made Jiraiya fall into a sluggish state, and Jiraiya could only murmur, "He is here." Chapter 474. This familiar chakra was so familiar to Jiraiya. This chakra belonged to his disciple, son of war, Uzumaki Nagato or Pain Rikudo. The moment he felt this chakra, Jiraiya's face was gloomy. Jiraiya, who had always been very frivolous, suddenly showed such a serious look. Whether it was Tsunade or Shizune, they couldn't help but be serious. Being able to make Jiraiya so serious, didn't it prove that the person who was detected was a very bad guy? Jiraiya. Who is he? Tsunade walked to Jiraiya's side and put her hand on Jiraiya's shoulder. She seemed to want Jiraiya to explain a little for her. But Jiraiya knew that now was not the time to explain to his wife one by one. He just took a step forward and stood in front of the Umbu who delivered the information for him. "Umbu of Hokage, listen to my order." Jiraiya suddenly ordered the Umbu. No, it should be the Umbu of Hokage. Speaking of which, this was actually a bit excessive for Jiraiya's identity, but now was not the time to care about such things. Obviously, the Umbu was also affected by Jiraiya's serious face. He bowed his head very respectfully and said seriously to Jiraiya, "Umbu of Hokage, listen to my order." After a little hesitation, Jiraiya finally gave the order. From now on, Woodleaf Village will enter the highest level of combat readiness. All the ninjas and Umbu in Konoha now began to act, guiding the civilians in Konoha and the children in the ninja school. Do everything possible to guide them all to a safe place and preserve the fire for Woodleaf Village. Our enemy this time is unusual. It is likely to be a full-scale invasion by the Akatsuki. So I hope the Umbu will do their best to guard the Nine Tails, Column Force and Uzumaki Naruto. No, Tsunade, I hope you can guard Uzumaki Naruto directly. In case of any emergency, directly take Uzumaki Naruto away from Woodleaf through reverse summoning and go to Shikatsu Forest to seek the protection of Katsuyu. When they heard the term highest level of combat readiness from Jiraiya's mouth, Hokage's Umbu, who was kneeling beside Jiraiya, and Tsunade, who was standing beside Jiraiya, also became serious. Only Shizune, who had been traveling with Tsunade all year round, was a little confused, but now was not the time to answer Shizune's questions. The highest level of combat readiness means that Woodleaf Village has faced with the threat of direct extermination. Everyone can only choose to fight to the death and fight to keep the fire of Woodleaf. When she heard Jiraiya's order to protect Uzumaki Naruto, Tsunade knew that Jiraiya was ready to face the upcoming enemy by herself. After years of fighting together, Tsunade has understood Jiraiya's character. Making such a decision proves that Jiraiya is ready to fight to the death. But as a ninja from Woodleaf Village, Tsunade's love for Woodleaf is not inferior to anyone, so even if she was reluctant to leave Tsunade, she still didn't say anything to refuse. After confirming all the orders from Jiraiya, the Umbu directly disappeared from Hokage's office. Apparently he went to convey Jiraiya's orders. After all, Woodleaf Ninja Village is an organization responsible for war. When encountering special situations, their response is very poor. From the time the Umbu left Hokage's office to the time the whole village acted, it was only a minute or two. Be sure to live, promise me. Tsunade stood beside Jiraiya and said to him very seriously. After decades of getting along, the feelings between Jiraiya and Tsunade are difficult for ordinary people to understand. Even the reason why Tsunade has been unwilling to accept Jiraiya before is partly because the feelings between the two of them are so deep that Tsunade is reluctant to let any unpredictable changes happen between the two of them. In the face of life and death, all the disguises are taken off. In Tsunade's eyes, there is only deep love and inseparable attachment to Jiraiya. Such emotions were naturally seen by Jiraiya. He reached out and held Tsunade's hand tightly. Jiraiya said to Tsunade seriously, "Don't worry, I will come back. I still have so many agreements with you and I still owe you so many promises. If I just let go." Before Jiraiya finished speaking, Tsunade directly pressed his mouth. Tsunade shook her head. Obviously, she didn't want Jiraiya to say anything bad before the war begins. Understanding Tsunade's meaning, Jiraiya slowly shook his head, took Tsunade's hand off his mouth, didn't speak, just nodded very seriously. At this moment, all words seemed to have become pale. The two of them only looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Jiraiya forced himself out of this atmosphere and said to Tsunade very seriously, "The goal of Akatsuki is the Bijou, so you must protect Shina Kushina and Naruto. Now that Watergate is training in Mount Mayaboku, the responsibility of protecting Shina Kushina and Naruto falls on us. Remember what I said, if something goes wrong, you must take Naruto and Shina Kushina to the Shikatsu forest. Woodleaf being destroyed is not as serious as Naruto being kidnapped." Although Jiraiya wasn't so clear about Akatsuki's specific plan, when he fought with Pain before, from Pain's words, Jiraiya naturally analyzed that Akatsuki wanted to gather all 9 Bijou and use them as a weapon to threaten the whole world. This situation is definitely more unacceptable to Jiraiya than Woodleaf being destroyed. "I understand. I'll go now." Tsunade opened the window of Hokage's office, jumped out of the window and rushed to Watergate's house. Shizune naturally heard the order Jiraiya just issued to Umbu and followed Tsunade's footsteps out of Hokage's office, but she didn't go to Watergate's house. Instead, she went to Kiba Hospital to prepare to follow the medical ninjas of Kiba Hospital. Looking at the empty Hokage's office, Jiraiya bit his tongue and quickly used summoning jutsu to summon Fukasaku Sennin to his side. Fukasaku Sennin was suddenly summoned by Jiraiya, and he didn't know why, but Fukasaku Sennin, who has chakra Sennin, naturally has extremely powerful perception. The huge and familiar chakra above the woodleaf was naturally easily detected by Fukasaku Sennin. "Little Jiraiya, it seems that our last action was a bit useless." Chapter 475. "So, little Jiraiya, it seems that you didn't call me here to ask me and my wife to help you enter Sage Mode." Fukasaku Sennin looked around him and didn't see any trace of his wife, Shima Sennin. Fukasaku Sennin knew that Jiraiya didn't seem to summon him to enter Sage Mode. As an old man who has lived for a long time, Fukasaku Sennin naturally quickly understood Jiraiya's mind, so he said to Jiraiya, "It seems that you plan to fight against Pain alone?" Jiraiya naturally didn't intend to hide his thoughts in front of Fukasaku Sennin. He nodded and said to Fukasaku Sennin, "Last time I used Sage Mode with you two to invade Amigakure. In such a situation, Pain was still able to save his life. He even recovered his strength in this short period of time, and now he appeared directly above Woodleaf. This proves that he has found a countermeasure to deal with Sage Mode or my Sage Mode. So if I let you two enter Sage Mode with me to fight against Pain, it will still be a situation of 9 deaths and 1 life. In this case, I can't let you two take risks with me. Minato is still practicing Sage Mode in Mount Mayaboku. He still needs the help of the two of you. Watergate is the hope against Akatsuki. I'm just a slightly rotten old man. It's enough to do my last part for Woodleaf and Ninja World, isn't it?" Listening to Jiraiya's words, Fukasaku Sennin also noticed Jiraiya's will to die. Jiraiya is obviously ready to appear for Woodleaf and Ninja World. Such an idea is difficult to change even if Fukasaku Sennin says more, isn't it? Since he can't change Jiraiya's will to die, Fukasaku Sanin didn't want to say so much to persuade Jiraiya. Instead, he led the topic to Watergate, who was still practicing in Mount Mayaboku. Don't worry, Jiraiya. Watergate has now cultivated Sage Mode to the final stage. During this period of time, Watergate has been working very hard. His talent is also very amazing. Although he hasn't completely completed the practice of Sage Mode, from the current signs, the Sage Mode that Watergate has practiced is very perfect. I'm just saying, if you can delay pain long enough, then Watergate is very likely to succeed in practicing Sage Mode and return to Woodleaf. Jiraiya naturally didn't doubt Fukasaku Senin's words, but Jiraiya was still very worried. Immortal, please don't tell Watergate about Woodleaf's current situation. Since he has already reached the final step of cultivating Immortal Mode, he naturally can't let all his previous efforts go to waste. I will also try my best to ensure that the shadow clone he left in Woodleaf doesn't have a chance to pass the information to his main body. Please grant me this, may be my last wish. Jiraiya, who knows that he is about to face a situation where there is no chance of survival, still thinks about his disciple in the end. Fukasaku Sanin was also a little speechless for a while. An inexplicable emotion was brewing in Fukasaku Senin's heart. This emotion made Fukasaku Sanin feel very uncomfortable. Little Jiraiya, remember my words, don't be so desperate. As long as you can delay long enough, there is still a chance to turn the tables. Don't give up your life so easily, do you understand what I mean? Fukasaku Sanin looked at Jiraiya very seriously. From the bottom of his heart, Fukasaku Sanin didn't want Jiraiya to sacrifice himself, so before leaving, Fukasaku Sanin still told Jiraiya not to give up his life easily. Watching Fukasaku Sanin turn into a cloud of smoke and disappear in front of him, Jiraiya was just about to move to seal Watergate's shadow clone in Woodleaf, so that Watergate couldn't get the information that Woodleaf was invaded, but a strong vibration suddenly appeared. Pain, who was suspended in the air, looked down at Konoha under his feet as if he was looking down at ants. He opened his hands and embraced the whole sky like a god embracing the world. With a tone of indifference and undeniable majesty, a short word came out from Pain's mouth: Super Shinra Tensei. Directly below Pain, a powerful repulsive force was generated on the ground. It was like a heavy hammer constantly hitting everything around him, whether it was the ground or the buildings. They were constantly smashed and then pushed by the repulsive force. A torrent formed by the wreckage of the houses and the soil suddenly appeared, the pit on the ground became bigger and bigger, and the range of Woodleaf destruction also became larger and larger. The strong vibration that Jiraiya just felt came from Pain's ninjutsu, Super Shinra Tensei, which was beyond common sense. Jiraiya immediately escaped from the building where Hokage's office was located and jumped a few times to the shadow rock at the commanding height of Woodleaf. Looking at the huge attack range that seemed to be constantly expanding, Jiraiya only felt his heart trembling. This is the place where he grew up. Although he left for many years, some changes have happened in many places. But when Jiraiya walked on Woodleaf, he always felt a familiar feeling. Woodleaf is his home. But his home was directly reduced to such a broken state under the attack of others? A flame full of anger and sadness burned in Jiraiya's heart, making Jiraiya's hatred for Akatsuki and Pain become stronger. They have touched one of the biggest taboos in Jiraiya's heart. At this moment, Jiraiya had no intention of blocking the news from Watergate and helping Woodleaf Ninja rescue. Jiraiya just wanted to find Pain quickly and use his fist and ninjutsu to let Pain know how fierce the flame in his heart was. Burn Pain's body with the fire of his heart. Pain, who was floating in the sky, seemed to feel that his ninjutsu had caused enough effect. Although he could more than double the attack range, this was not Pain's purpose. Capturing the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki is the real purpose of invading Konoha. Before that, he must ensure that he has enough power to fight against the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, or the Kyuubi's own power. So Pain manipulated the gravity to let his figure fall slowly. After a while, he was already standing on the ground that had been destroyed and turned into ruins. Chapter 476. Looking at the ruins in front of him, Naruto couldn't react in time. Just a moment ago, everything was so normal. He stayed at home and chatted with his mother casually. But suddenly, a violent vibration came from the ground. Lascivious Sage's wife, Tsunade, suddenly appeared in his house, and without any explanation she took his mother and himself to the periphery of Konoha. Behind them, the torrent formed by the ruins spread like a tide. His house and the familiar streets around his house were destroyed in an instant. On the way to evacuate, Naruto saw many of his neighbors were crushed under the ruins. Naruto knew that his neighbors were ordinary people, and it was impossible for them to get out of the huge concrete slabs. How Naruto wished he could help his weak neighbors out of their predicament, but when Naruto was about to take action, he was stopped by his mother and Tsunade at the same time. If it was according to Naruto's usual character, no matter who stopped him, Naruto would definitely save those who needed to be saved. But maybe it's the terrifying scene that suddenly appeared in front of him, or maybe it's the serious look of his mother and Tsunade, or maybe it's the fear in his heart that can't be dispelled. Naruto can only run around like a mouse trying to survive. He doesn't know what's going on, but Naruto can only run around like a mouse trying to survive. Shinakushina, I will send you and Naruto to the Shikatsu forest. Katsuki will be responsible for the safety of the two of you. Now for Woodleaf, these buildings, these ninjas aren't as important as the two of you. You must ensure your own safety, do you understand what I mean? Tsunade looked at Shinakushina and said seriously. When Tsunade said Naruto's name, Shinakushina dug out some important information that Watergate occasionally revealed to her. Akatsuki organization, such an organization that had their eyes on his wife and his children. Even if Minato paid attention to secrecy, he still intentionally or unintentionally revealed a lot of relevant information about this kind of matter that was closely related to his family. Don't worry, Tsunade-sama. Now that Watergate is not in the village, the task of protecting the village can only be handed over to you and Jiraiya-sensei. Please pay attention to your own safety. Otherwise, I don't know how much Minato will blame himself when he returns. Tsunade glanced at Shinakushina and didn't say anything. She just nodded her head gently, but didn't give any promise to Shinakushina. Shinakushina also seemed to be aware of her slip of the tongue. After all, it was an important period for Woodleaf to resist the foreign enemy, so it was indeed inappropriate for her to say such willful words. In silence, Tsunade quickly printed hand seals, and the reverse summoning technique was quickly completed. After a burst of smoke, Naruto and Shinakushina disappeared. Tsunade looked at the center of the destruction, and two figures were faintly visible. Tsunade really hoped that she could reinforce Jiraiya, but now the place that needed her most was not the center of the battlefield but Kiba Hospital. This sudden attack, like a natural disaster, must have caused a lot of injuries to Konoha's civilians and ninjas. He must do his best to help these injured people recover from their injuries and face the possible invasion in the future. After meeting with many medical ninjas in Kiba Hospital, Tsunade immediately summoned a large number of slugs, so that each medical ninja had at least one slug clone. As long as they encountered a troublesome injury that was difficult to solve, these medical ninjas could put the slugs on the seriously injured person, and Tsunade would remotely use her own medical ninjutsu to treat these seriously injured people. Pain, although I knew that you would invade Konoha one day, I didn't expect that this day would come so soon. Jiraiya looked at Pain standing opposite him and said with a slightly dignified expression, "But I didn't expect you to be so ruthless. Although there are many ninjas in Woodleaf, there are many civilians who can't guarantee their lives. Do you know how many civilians will be injured or even lose their lives with such a large-scale attack? Pain, is this your so-called way to save the ninja world?" In Jiraiya's ears, it seems that the sound of injured people and the sound of blood gushing out of the dead people constantly echoed. It's not that Jiraiya hasn't seen a bloodier scene, but such a large-scale slaughter of civilians is extremely rare in the ninja world. Most ninjas will follow the unspoken rule of not hurting civilians as much as possible, but this time Pain did too much. Such an excessive action is unacceptable to Jiraiya, and it made Jiraiya angry. But hearing Jiraiya's angry question or reprimand, Pain didn't seem to be moved at all. He looked at Jiraiya and said coldly to Jiraiya, "For long-term peace, what's wrong with making such a small sacrifice?" Pain's plain tone made Jiraiya even angrier. "Who do you think you are? You can treat the lives of such people as a number, as a sacrifice that can be abandoned at will. Who am I?" Pain looked at Jiraiya and said very indifferently, "I told you a long time ago, I am a person who walks in the world on behalf of God. In other words, I am God." Jiraiya originally wanted to let Pain or Nagato know that what he did was not a good thing before he started, but the more he talked about Pain's attitude of treating human life as nothing, the angrier Jiraiya felt. Since there is nothing to say, he can only use his fist to prove that he is right? Rushing towards Pain, the two of them began a close combat, one with bare hands and the other with a black iron rod. Jiraiya fought back and forth, and even with his many years of combat experience, Jiraiya even had a certain advantage. But Jiraiya's heart couldn't relax at all, because Jiraiya knew that Tendo in front of him was only a part of Pain's Rikudo. There are more forces that have not been taken out by Nagato, or they are fighting in other places of the Woodleaf. Such a guess appeared in Jiraiya's heart, making Jiraiya more and more anxious. Chapter 477. While Jiraiya and Pain were fighting, Tsunade used the slug clones she summoned to heal the injured civilians and ninjas in the woodleaf. In a slightly remote corner of the woodleaf, it looked so abrupt at this moment. This was because the surroundings of the mansion were clearly in ruins, but the mansion didn't seem to be damaged at all. If one took a closer look at this house that was out of place with its surroundings, it wouldn't be difficult to discover that this house was covered by a thin layer of barrier. A kind of power from the heaven and earth seemed to be under the control of someone to protect this house. This courtyard was Nangongji's home. Naturally, Nangongji, who could also control natural energy, had already sensed Pain's presence when he appeared above the woodleaf and began to accumulate energy. However, Nangongji did not choose to rush to Woodleaf's aid. Instead, he hurriedly brought his family back to his home. After arranging Nangong Ro, Mashiro and Little Linger to a relatively safe place in his house, Nangongji stood in his courtyard and stuck his tribulation sword in the middle of the courtyard. Channeling a large amount of natural energy into the defensive formation he had set up around the courtyard earlier, it was amplified by the natural energy. The originally extremely powerful formation was almost 300% effective. Even Tendo Pain's Super Shinra Tensei could only shake the defensive formation a little. The door of Nangongji's house was slowly opened from the inside as if they had sensed that the sudden calamitous attack had ended. Mashiro cautiously peeked his head out from the door, as he asked Nangongji, who was standing in the courtyard. "Gong Gong. What's the situation?" As soon as he finished this sentence, Mashiro saw the ruins piled up like a mountain outside his house because he was standing at a slightly higher position. Although Mashiro can be considered to be experienced and knowledgeable, he usually saw a scene of dozens or hundreds of people fighting at most. Compared to this scene of blood and wailing everywhere, it was simply a small thing. Mashiro lightly covered her mouth, as if she was trying to suppress the scream that was about to come out of her mouth. But after hearing Mashiro's question, Nangongji still looked at the empty place in front of him with a serious face. He didn't look back, but his tone was extremely serious as he said to Mashiro. "Mashiro, go back now, take Mashiro and Little Linger to the basement I prepared for you." He immediately activated all the formations in the room. Immediately. Now. Nangongji's sudden order caught Mashiro off guard. But after a long time of relying on Nangongji and respecting Nangongji's orders, Mashiro instinctively rushed into his house, bringing Little Linger and Mashiro to the mysterious basement that Nangongji usually wouldn't let them enter. Mashiro didn't know how powerful this basement was, but Nangongji was very clear about it. When Nangongji first subdued the Blood Garment Pavilion and returned to the Woodleaf, Nangongji was actually worried about whether the Woodleaf could completely guarantee the safety of his family. So after Nangongji gained the ability, he referred to various ancient books and secret techniques from the Blood Garment Pavilion and built a secret room for himself in his house. This secret room wasn't big, but Nangongji carved at least a few hundred defensive and counterattack formations in it. As long as all the formations were activated, Nangongji might not be able to forcibly break through them even if he used all his strength. He might even be seriously injured due to the various formations. This was the last resort Nangongji prepared for his family. If there was something he couldn't solve, Nangongji would use all his strength to directly activate the spatial jump formation carved on the outside of this secret room. He would directly transfer this secret room to the Lion Clan's alternate space. He believed that this would ensure the safety of his family, right? Knowing that he had nothing to worry about, Nangongji finally slowly pulled out the long sword he stabbed into the ground and pointed the tip of his sword at an empty space in front of him. His words were cold and sharp. Nangongji slowly said, "That's right. Since you're here, then show yourself. In front of a swordsman, all dirty tricks are laughable." That's right. Nangongji felt that someone had invaded his home. That's why he immediately let Mashiro bring Little Linger and Nangong Ro to the secret room he had prepared. On one hand, it was to ensure the safety of his family, on the other hand, it was to make himself less restrained in battle. After Nangongji's voice fell, the space in front of him slowly distorted. A figure wearing a whirlpool mask and a black uniform with red clouds stood in front of Nangongji. Only one of his eyes was revealed as he looked at Nangongji with a smile that wasn't a smile. Hoodlum. Regarding the information of Akatsuki organization, Nangongji had always personally checked it. Regarding this person who had suddenly appeared in Akatsuki organization, and there was almost no other information about him, Nangongji was also very cautious. Because in Nangongji's view, Pain or Nagato wasn't the kind of person who was particularly good at scheming and scheming. In the eyes of such a person who regarded himself as God, perhaps no amount of scheming was more useful than his ability to surpass the common people. But in these years, the Akatsuki was silent, and even used a lot of dirty tricks to seize benefits for themselves. Such things didn't sound like something Pain would do. Therefore, Nangongja boldly guessed that perhaps there was a person who was good at scheming in the Akatsuki, giving advice and strategizing for Pain in the Akatsuki. And after Hoodlum appeared, this guess became more and more trustworthy. But Nangongja didn't have time to confirm all of this. Hoodlum had already appeared in front of him. The obvious spatial fluctuations were enough to prove that Hoodlum was a person who was proficient in spatial ninjutsu. This was really a headache. As someone who understood Watergate and had touched the surface of spatial abilities, Nangongja fully understood how difficult and terrifying it was to deal with a person who was proficient in spatial ninjutsu. For such a person, challenging someone of a higher level and insta-killing someone was simply a common occurrence. There was nothing to be surprised about. Chapter 478. It's rare for the famous Woodleaf King of Hell to remember a nobody like me. Should I feel honored? Hoodlum looked at Nangongja with a hint of mockery. Just as Hoodlum had said, he was a nameless person. But it was precisely because he was a nobody that people feared. To be able to hide everything and carry out their actions silently in the dark, such a person was more frightening than those ambitious people who stood in the open. What's your purpose? Seeing Hoodlum appear directly in front of him without attacking, Nangongja knew that Hoodlum must have something to say or conditions to discuss with him. Therefore, Nangongja didn't want to pretend to be polite with Hoodlum and directly talked about the topic. When Hoodlum saw Nangongja's attitude, he let out a soft laugh and said to Nangongja, "I can see that you're a Woodleaf King of Hell. Even though you're called the Woodleaf King of Hell, I can see that you're not brainwashed by the Woodleaf King of Hell. You don't see the Woodleaf King of Hell as everything you want to protect. After Pain attacked, you didn't respond to the Woodleaf King of Hell's call and chose to stay at home to protect your family." Nangongja didn't want to deny Hoodlum's words. After all, even though Nangongja occasionally helped the Woodleaf King of Hell, it was because the Woodleaf King of Hell paid a price. Or rather, it was because Nangongja felt like it. Nangongja was never a person who would sacrifice his life to protect the Woodleaf King of Hell. For Nangongja, the only people he could sacrifice his life for were his family members. Other than his family members and people he recognized, the others were dispensable. Even though it sounded cruel and cold-blooded, Nangongja wasn't ashamed at all because this was the path that Nangongja chose for himself. Continue. After hearing Nangongja's words, Hoodlum felt that he had grasped the rhythm of the conversation with Nangongja. Thus, he slowly nodded and continued to speak to Nangongja. "I came here to make a simple deal with someone like you who is called King of Hell. Our Akatsuki's goal is very simple, which is to obtain the Nine Tails column force from the Woodleaf village. There is no direct conflict between us. I came here to see you in the hope that you won't have any direct conflict with us during this period. After all, as the head of the Blood Pavilion who cultivates internal chi, you don't have much of a relationship with us ninjas. Continue living your life of Hell's life. Continue to enjoy your indifferent life." Hoodlum Nangongja Nangongja King of Hell Hell Hell. King of Hell 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 Hell. In the past, when Nangongja wasn't that strong in order to make a living, Nangongja was in the limelight. However, when Nangongja's strength and influence started to expand, Nangongja didn't show much ambition. On the contrary, he seemed to like living in seclusion in his own home and didn't have too much entanglement with others. Therefore, Hoodlum aimed at this point and raised his request. This kind of situation wouldn't harm Nangongja's interests and would be beneficial to him. Wasn't this exactly what the two of them wanted? Originally, Hoodlum thought that Nangongja would gladly accept his conditions. However, he discovered that Nangongja didn't loosen his grip on his sword. Instead, he tightened his grip on it. Hoodlum's brows under his mask frowned. What did he say to provoke Nangongja? Hoodlum, huh? Just as I expected, you are a qualified schemer and politician. It seems like before you came looking for me, you did a lot of research to understand my temperament and personality. Then, you came up with suitable words to persuade me to agree to your request. Perhaps all of this seems natural to you, right? After all, I don't have any feelings for Woodleaf, and I don't care about those who aren't familiar with me. However, you guessed wrong. You shouldn't use my family's safety to threaten me, or my friends' lives to threaten me. Your words are very careful, but I can still hear the danger in you and your unscrupulous attitude. The more you say, the more obvious your attitude is. I don't mind others analyzing my character, but I don't like people making decisions for me even more. Since you have become a huge threat to my family and myself, then eliminating all threats has always been my favorite way of doing things. What Nan Gongzhi said was illogical, and even sounded a little unreasonable like a bandit. But after thinking about it carefully, it wasn't difficult to find that Nan Gongzhi's actions were actually in line with Nan Gongzhi's usual behavior. However, these emotional changes in Nan Gongzhi's heart were meaningless to Hoodlum. Hoodlum could analyze Nan Gongzhi's character, but there was no way to control Nan Gongzhi's thoughts, or control Nan Gongzhi's soul. It was really troublesome. Seeing Nan Gongzhi's expression of wanting to get rid of him, Hoodlum could only say this once again. Why do people nowadays like to do things that don't conform to common sense? Itachi was already dead, but Sasuke didn't evolve Manjikyu Sharingan as he expected. Instead, he transplanted Itachi's eyes into Manjikyu Sharingan. And Nan Gongzhi, who was standing in front of him, was even more out of his expectations. Obviously, there were no conditions that could threaten Nan Gongzhi's interests, but Nan Gongzhi didn't hesitate to start a war with him. At this moment he looked like he was full of fighting spirit. It was really as Hoodlum had said, everything was so troublesome. Hoodlum took out a scroll from his arms and looked coldly at Nan Gongzhi. Originally, everything was negotiable, but since you're so uncooperative, in order to prevent you from becoming a threat to my future plans, it's better for me to eliminate you directly. Hoodlum tore open the scroll in his hand, and 2 clouds of smoke appeared next to him. After the smoke dissipated, 2 doppelgangers of the 6 paths appeared before Nan Gongzhi. They had orange hair and wore black uniforms with red clouds on them. Their faces were densely packed with black iron rods that would make one's hair stand on end. Chapter 479. The 2 Rikudo clones standing opposite Nan Gongzhi were Pain and Pain of Azura, who had been destroyed by Jiraiya but had been restored. These 2 Rikudo clones were chosen by Pain and Hoodlum after careful discussion. They were the 2 most effective clones to deal with Nan Gongzhi, aside from Pain of Tendo. Rendo was good at close combat. Coupled with his special ability to extract souls, Rendo was a big killer in close combat. On the other hand, Nan Gongzhi himself was a martial artist who cultivated internal strength. Although he also had a long-range and close-range attack like Sword Chi, he would still choose to engage in close-range combat due to his instinctive attacking methods. Therefore, the human Dao was actually very suitable to deal with Nan Gongzhi's 6 paths doppelgangers. Pain of Azura was a long-range attacker who was good at using a variety of firearms. The barrage of bullets and the range of missiles were also very troublesome for an internal strength practitioner like Nan Gongzhi. Although the damage of bullets and missiles was limited for Nan Gongzhi, they could still play a role in restraining him. If Pain of Tendo could also participate in this battle, he could use his gravity and repulsion to control Nan Gongzhi's movements. He could then form a circle with Rendo and Pain of Azura to suppress Nan Gongzhi. However, this attack on Wood Leaf wasn't to eliminate Nan Gongzhi, but to capture 9 tails. Therefore, Pain naturally had to focus more on Naruto. Even the 2 Rikudo clones summoned by Hoodlum were only a backup plan. The best situation was naturally for Nan Gongzhi to accept Hoodlum's suggestion, but Hoodlum didn't seem to be ready to show his true strength, so Nagato decided that if things didn't work out, he could only transfer 2 6 paths clones from the already compact combat force to cooperate with Hoodlum to restrain Nan Gongzhi. After a short moment of sluggishness, the Rikudo clones began to observe their surroundings. When Pain saw Nan Gongzhi standing in front of him with a face full of battle intent and a black longsword in his hand reflecting a different kind of brilliance under the sunlight, his expression was still very calm. However, he couldn't help but say to Hoodlum in a helpless tone, "Don't worry. It seems like your plan has failed. Scheming is just a small matter. In the end, you still need to use force to solve all problems." Being ridiculed by Pain of Rendo, Hoodlum didn't show much disappointment. After all, Hoodlum had a certain degree of vigilance against Pain. After Pain's 2 Rikudo clones appeared, Hoodlum didn't act as confident as he did in front of Nan Gongzhi. I don't know how this Nan Gongzhi's brain works. It's obviously a win-win proposition, but he rejected it. I can't do anything about it. After saying that, Hoodlum even spread out his hands to show his helplessness. If Pain didn't know that collecting tailed beasts was one of Hoodlum's firm goals, he might have thought that Hoodlum was deliberately provoking Nan Gongzhi so that Nan Gongzhi could wear down his strength. Such a sinister idea seemed a bit inconceivable. After all, how could there be internal strife in the face of a powerful enemy? But Pain, who knows Hoodlum very well, can tell everyone very seriously that according to Hoodlum's usual behavior, this kind of thing is just child's play. Scheming, eloquence, and other things are as simple as eating and drinking for a person like Hoodlum. As long as it's to achieve his goals, there's no price that Hoodlum can't pay, no dignity that Hoodlum can't abandon, and no means that Hoodlum can't use. Pain doesn't know what kind of environment created such a person like Hoodlum, but Pain has a deep fear of such a person who is temporarily his ally. As for the legendary Uchiha Madara that Hoodlum has been talking about, Nagato didn't believe it from the beginning. How could a person who can pacify the war of the shinobi world with his own strength and establish Woodleaf Village with the shinobi god Senju Takuma be such a person who only knows how to scheme? Just when Hoodlum and Pain were looking at each other, Nangong's voice broke the strange atmosphere between Pain and Hoodlum. I say, are you done yet? I generously let you gather your strength. I want to see what kind of powerful ninja the Akatsuki's god, and the one behind the scenes is. But your affectionate gaze makes me wonder if there's something wrong with your orientation? Nangong's tone was filled with indescribable disgust and disdain. It seems that in Nangong's heart, Hoodlum and Pain may have cooperated because of each other's twisted orientation. Although they knew that Nangongja deliberately used such words to anger the two of them, making them lose their minds in the following battle. But Hoodlum and Pain were still angered by Nangongja's words. Needless to say, how could a person who regards himself as a god accept a mortal questioning him? Although Hoodlum's face was covered by a mask, it was obvious that Hoodlum's aura was fluctuating at the moment, fully showing that his heart was not calm at all. He also had a woman he loved the most, and even his current actions could be said to be for the sake of his beloved woman who had left this world. For Hoodlum, this person was a taboo that no one could touch. Although Nangong's words had another meaning, it was still unbearable for Hoodlum. Courting death. Courting death. Although the two of them were still suspicious of each other because of Nangong's intentional words, they joined forces and simultaneously declared their intention to attack Nangongja. Looking at Rin Jiandao and Hoodlum charging toward him, as well as the densely packed gun and cannon muzzles on Azura's body, the corners of Nangong's lips curled up slightly. How long has it been since I last fought with my full strength? Although Nangongja really liked to stay at home and spend his days with his family, as a martialist, Nangongja's blood was also filled with the desire to fight. Nangong's body actually started to tremble from excitement when the three people who were at or above the shadow level launched their attacks at him at the same time. His blood was boiling at this moment. Chapter 480. Behind Mount Mayaboku, Watergate, who was sitting cross-legged and cultivating sage mode, suddenly had his calm aura disrupted. Watergate's eyebrows knitted together beautifully. The fluctuation of his spirit caused the immortal technique chakra, which was constantly harmonizing in Watergate's body, to become restless. The balance between natural energy, physical energy, and spiritual energy was instantly broken. Watergate's skin also began to slowly turn into a toad-like bluish-gray color. Pieces of flesh quietly appeared on Watergate's cheeks. Seeing the changes in Watergate, Shima Sennin, who was squatting on the side with a thick wooden stick in her hand, immediately took action. Her petite body leaped up high and fiercely knocked Watergate's head with the wooden stick in her hand, forcing all the berserk natural energy in Watergate's body out of his body. When the natural energy was completely expelled, Watergate's constantly changing body finally returned to its original state. When the natural energy in his body was forcibly expelled due to his failure to harmonize the natural energy, some of his physical energy and spiritual energy would also be expelled from his body. Therefore, Watergate's face had become somewhat pale, and he seemed to be somewhat weak. However, Watergate didn't seem to care about how bad his physical condition was, because at this moment, Watergate's eyes were full of anger. Such anger lingered in Watergate's heart, making it difficult for Watergate to get rid of it. He could only stare into the distance with a pair of red eyes. The anger in his eyes even had a feeling that it was about to burst out. Watergate brat, what's wrong with you? You haven't had such a serious natural energy outbreak since the end of the first stage of cultivation. Shima Sennin actually regarded Watergate as her nephew. She asked with a bit of anxiety and a bit of affection. Minato, who was usually modest and polite, had completely lost his usual little son attitude. Instead, he stood up angrily and yelled towards the sky, "What are you doing? What are you going to do?" "Pain, I Watergate swear to kill you. Swear to kill you." Seeing Watergate's abnormal appearance, Shima Sennin's eyes were full of worry. When she heard Watergate say the name Pain, Shima Sennin couldn't help but have a feeling of fear in her heart. As if something bad had happened, she wanted to go forward and say something to Watergate to calm him down. However, when Watergate was meditating, Fukasaku Sennin, who was suddenly summoned, appeared behind him and put his hand on his wife, Fukasaku Senin's body. Obviously, Fukasaku Senin already had a plan in his heart. After shouting a few times towards the sky, Watergate seemed to have finally calmed down the excitement in his heart. Although there was still anger in his eyes, he had obviously calmed down. Seeing that Watergate had calmed down, Fukasaku Senin also took a few steps forward with a dignified expression and came in front of Watergate. It seems that, you already know what happened in Woodleaf, right? When Watergate heard Fukasaku Senin's words, he immediately stared at Fukasaku Senin. Although he didn't speak, the meaning in his eyes was obviously hoping that Fukasaku Senin, who seemed to know everything, would explain it to him. Just now, when you were still cultivating, little Jiraiya suddenly summoned me. With a bit of pain, Fukasaku Senin said to Watergate with a dignified expression. It seems that everything happened so suddenly that little Jiraiya didn't have time to block your shadow clone's actions, so your shadow clone sent you the information about Woodleaf. That's right, at this moment, Pain is attacking Woodleaf village. I left early so I don't know what scale of invasion Woodleaf has suffered, but judging from your reaction, Woodleaf must have suffered heavy losses at the moment. Please let me go back and fight with my sensei. With a bit of firmness and a bit of pleading, Watergate said to Fukasaku Senin. Mount Mayaboku is actually a relatively independent space. Without the permission of these toads of Mount Mayaboku, Watergate can't leave Mount Mayaboku at will. When Sensei fought with Pain before, I couldn't feel it in time. But at that time, Sensei used Sage Mode, but the situation was still so miserable. This time, you and Shima Senin didn't leave, so there is no way for Jiraiya to enter Sage Mode when he came. In this case, Sensei still wants to fight with Pain. What's the difference between that and death? In the end, Watergate's voice has become no different from a roar because of anger and excitement. But Fukasaku Senin didn't feel angry because of Watergate's rudeness. At this moment, Fukasaku Senin's heart was also full of anger. At this moment, the anger brought by Watergate's roar was simply dispensable compared to the anger in Fukasaku Senin's heart at this moment. Jumping high from the ground, Fukasaku Senin clenched his toad into the shape of a fist and punched directly on Watergate's head. The fist with anger and chakra directly knocked Watergate down. Watergate could only sit on the ground looking at Fukasaku Senin. He didn't seem to understand why Fukasaku Senin suddenly hit him. Do you think I'm willing to watch Jiraiya fight with Pain? Jiraiya is also a child I watched grow up step by step. If I could choose, I would rather fight with Jiraiya now. But I can't because I have more important things to do. That is to let you master Sage Mode so you can grasp the opportunity to defeat Pain. Jiraiya can only master Sage Mode to an imperfect level because of his aptitude. The imperfect Sage Mode makes it impossible for Jiraiya to gain more power, but you are different. According to your current situation, the Sage Mode you practice is almost miraculously perfect. If you master the perfect Sage Mode, we may be able to end the Son of War and eliminate this war that swept the shinobi world. When Jiraiya's life and the lives of all the people in the entire shinobi world are on the same scale, what should I choose? If it's rational, naturally the whole shinobi world is more important. But if it's emotional, I really don't want Jiraiya to lose his life like this. I was so hesitant, so I didn't know how to choose. So I endured the grief in my heart and returned to Mount Mayaboku. In order to let you master Sage Mode as soon as possible so that I can get the best of both worlds. Watergate boy, do you understand what I mean? Chapter 481. After listening to Fukasaku Senin's words, Watergate finally stabilized his emotions completely. Whether it was anger or sadness, they were all removed from Watergate's eyes, or they were forcibly suppressed. Because Watergate knew that no matter how sad and angry he was, it didn't make any sense. He wouldn't let Pain suffer any harm, and he would lose the opportunity to save Woodleaf and his sensei. The focus of everything is still on Sage Mode. As long as he succeeds in practicing it, then everything will be solved. After figuring out the key points, Watergate also stood in the place where he meditated before. But Watergate knew that it was impossible to master Sage Mode in a short time with his current practice speed. So Watergate suddenly remembered the practice method Naruto showed when he practiced wind release with his child before. Ninjutsu, multiple shadow clone technique. Clouds of smoke were produced around Watergate. When the smoke dissipated, it could be seen that Watergate had summoned 9 shadow clones through shadow clone technique, plus Watergate himself. A total of 10 Watergate were standing there. Watergate, you are... Looking at Watergate suddenly creating his own shadow clones, Fukasaku Sennin seemed to be thinking about the meaning of Watergate's actions. But soon, Fukasaku Sennin understood Minato's intention. The shadow clone jutsu could reflect all his experiences back to his original body. So, wouldn't it be twice the effort for half the result if he used the shadow clone jutsu? But after Fukasaku Sennin thought of the advantages brought by shadow clone technique, he also thought of the adverse effects after excessive use of shadow clone technique. A lot of fatigue and chakra consumption are fed back to the main body, which is likely to cause the main body to faint or even deeper damage. Fukasaku Sennin understood these things, and Watergate was naturally more clear. But looking at Watergate's resolute appearance now, it was obvious that he also calculated the damage to himself. Immortals, I'll have to trouble you to watch over my cultivation. Bowing slightly to Fukasaku Sennin and Shima Sennin, Watergate led his 9 shadow clones to sit on the ground and began to guide natural energy into his body, mixing it into chakra mode, allowing himself to practice sage mode. Fukasaku Sennin and Shima Sennin looked at Watergate, who was sitting on the ground and had begun to harmonize the natural energy, and then looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. After that, they could only walk toward the place where Watergate was sitting cross-legged with a stick in their hands. In the courtyard of Nangongji's house, Nangongji and Pain were fighting in close combat. Because of his special ability, Pain mostly used his palms to fight against Nangongji's sword when he attacked. It must be known that Heaven's Retribution sword with sword energy was extremely sharp, but Pain also seemed to have an extremely deep experience in using his palms to fight against sharp weapons. Every time Nangongji used his swordsmanship against Pain, Pain always used his palms to avoid Nangongji's Heaven's Retribution sword. And Nangongji was naturally happy to see that his opponent was such a ninja who was good at close combat. Only such an experienced and powerful taijutsu ninja could hone his swordsmanship. So in fact, when Nangongji fought with Pain, he didn't go all out. After all, he didn't have to win the battle against Hoodlum and Pain's Rikudo. In fact, Nangongji also took this opportunity to vent his excessive desire to fight. At the same time, he helped with Leaf to contain the invading enemy. It could be considered as reporting back to the people who lived in Woodleaf over the years. Seeing Nangongji and Pain fighting back and forth, Hoodlum seemed to be impatient. A Rikudo clone was able to tie down Nangongji so tightly. Then, if the opportunity was right, would he be able to eliminate Nangongji, such a threat? For Hoodlum, Nangongji was indeed an unstable factor. This was because ever since Nangongji entered his peak, he rarely fought. Most of the time he stayed at home. Hoodlum didn't have a very clear estimate of Nangongji's strength. Hoodlum felt that he couldn't easily let go of a person who he didn't understand and had such a strong strength. So Hoodlum's body disappeared from where he was originally standing and suddenly appeared behind Nangongji. In his hand he was holding a kunai. Obviously he was prepared to take advantage of the fact that Nangongji was tied down by Nangongji. But after seeing Hoodlum's actions, whether it was Pain or Pain's face had some inexplicable strange expressions. It was like a child who was playing a prank. Their eyes contained a bit of slyness and schadenfreude. And Nangongji naturally also noticed Hoodlum, who suddenly appeared behind him. Originally, Nangongji was able to fight to his heart's content with Pain's taijutsu, but at this moment he was slightly unhappy. Originally he wanted to fight with Pain and let himself relax. After that, he was too lazy to care about what these Akatsuki ninjas were doing. But now Hoodlum actually appeared behind him and was prepared to attack him. Nangongji couldn't turn a blind eye to this. This guy. Glancing at Hoodlum, who was standing behind him, Nangongji's eyebrows slightly wrinkled together. Obviously he was somewhat unhappy. Teach him a lesson. The speed of Heaven's disaster sword in his hand increased. The sword shadow began to become more and more blurred. As the sword's speed became faster and faster, sword chi actually split from Heaven's disaster sword. 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 4, 4 turned into 8. At first glance there was a kind of endless feeling. Scatter. The condensed sword chi around Heaven's disaster sword scattered under Nangongji's thought. Suddenly they rushed towards Hoodlum, who was standing behind him. The sword chi wrapped around Hoodlum, blocking all his escape routes. And Hoodlum naturally also discovered that he was facing a dangerous situation. He wanted to use his space ninjutsu to escape, but when he was about to enter his space, a feeling of fear suddenly appeared in his heart. Hoodlum could only quickly cut off the connection between himself and the space. This feeling of crisis disappeared. Chapter 482. However, this didn't mean that Hoodlum was out of danger. After all, if he couldn't hide in his own space, he would have to rely on his own strength to resist the countless sword energy swords. Nangongzhi and Pain weren't sure if Hoodlum could withstand such an attack. However, such an attack was enough to make Hoodlum, who usually pretended to be mysterious, reveal some of his strength, right? Nangongzhi seemed to have expected that Hoodlum wouldn't be able to use his space ninjutsu in his sword energy formation. Seeing that Hoodlum was completely under his control, Nangongzhi divided his attention. While fighting with Pain, he controlled his sword energy to attack Hoodlum. Yes. Although it looked complicated, the sword energy swords circling around Hoodlum seemed to become restless under Nangongzhi's control. Under Nangongzhi's control, the sword energy swords began to vibrate slowly. The originally transparent sword energy swords became more illusory and filled with a sharp aura. The sword chi swords were like butterflies flitting through flowers as they attacked Hoodlum. At the beginning there were only a few swords attacking Hoodlum. With his taijutsu, Hoodlum was still able to dodge in the limited space in front of him. However, as time passed, more and more sword energy swords attacked Hoodlum. Hoodlum's space to dodge became smaller and smaller. When a sword brushed past Hoodlum's neck, Hoodlum knew that he could no longer hide his strength. Hoodlum opened his hands and two strange white plant sprouts suddenly appeared in his palms. After coming into contact with the air, the two sprouts seemed to be stimulated by something and quickly grew. After a while, the two sprouts grew into twigs that were about 2 meters long and as thick as a wrist. Hoodlum grabbed the two strange white twigs in his hands and quickly waved them. The twigs seemed to have excellent toughness. When waved at high speed, they even had characteristics similar to whips. Hoodlum waved the two long and thick branches in his hands in a vigorous manner. Finally, he didn't have to be in such a difficult situation under the siege of Nangongzhi's sword formation. However, when they saw the strange twigs, whether it was Nangongzhi or Pain, both of them had a strange expression. As two people who had almost touched the core of the ninja world, Nangongzhi and Pain naturally recognized that Hoodlum was using the wood-release ninjutsu that was used by Woodleaf's first Hokage. However, whether it was Nangongzhi or Pain, both of them knew that Hoodlum was using the Uchiha clan's Sharingan to cast the spatial ability. Did he combine the power of the Uchiha and Senju, the enemies of the Uchiha clan? Although they didn't know who the real identity of this person was, now it seems that it is getting more and more interesting. Seeing that Hoodlum still had room to resist, Nangongzhi's bad taste slowly emerged. Aren't you deliberately hiding your strength? Since you are only willing to take out your trump card when you are forced into a desperate situation, then of course I will satisfy your request and let you experience a crisis. Injecting his sword chi into the sword in his hand, a crescent-shaped sword chi rushed in the direction of Rendo. When Rendo saw that Nangongzhi suddenly forced him to retreat, he was very curious about what Nangongzhi would do next. Pain now understood that although Nangongzhi seemed to be full of fighting spirit, in fact, he didn't have any killing intent. What Nangongzhi wanted to do at the moment was to entangle the three of them and give Woodleaf a chance. Now Tendo Pain was entangled by Jiraiya, and Rendo Pain and Shirato Pain were also entangled by Nangongzhi. 3 of Pain's 6 paths were gone, but the remaining 3 Gikido, Jigakudo, and Chikishoto were not so easy to deal with. At least in the perception of Rendo, the other 4 6 paths doppelgangers who were not with him have not lost any of their members. In this case, even if they were entangled by Nangongzhi, what could they do? Doesn't it also mean that Nangongzhi is also trapped here? And Woodleaf has been attacked for so long, as the 4th Hokage, Namikaze Watergate has not appeared yet. Does it mean that Namikaze Watergate is not in the range of Woodleaf right now? There were only 3 Kage-level powerhouses in Woodleaf. Jiraiya was entangled by Tendo, Nangongzhi was entangled by the 2 of them in Hoodlum. Tsunade was already struggling to treat the wounded. As long as the other 3 6 paths doppelgangers found any information about Naruto, then he would immediately send Conan, who was guarding him, to cooperate with the other 3 6 paths doppelgangers to capture the 9 tails who could only transform into Rokubi mode according to the information column force, who had not fully opened the seal yet. In Pain's eyes, the goddess of victory had already begun to smile at him. No, he himself was a god walking in the human world. He did not need the goddess of victory's care because he was a god, right? Thinking of this, Pain looked at Hoodlum, who was trapped in the sword formation, with some schadenfreude. Just as Pain was worried that Hoodlum would deliberately weaken his strength and deliberately cause a conflict between him and Nangongzhi, once he encountered an opportunity to weaken such a schemer, Pain was naturally willing to facilitate such a thing to happen. For Pain, the most useful thing was actually Hoodlum's cunning mind. After all, Pain was self-aware. Although he could do such a thing, it would often be full of loopholes. He was still not as skilled as Hoodlum, who was immersed in conspiracy for a long time. But as for Hoodlum's strength, Pain felt that the weaker Hoodlum was the better. As a guy who relied on his brain to make a living, if he had a sword in his hand that was enough to kill his master, wouldn't it be too dangerous? Everyone has been in the shinobi world for so many years. What kind of people haven't they seen and what kind of things they haven't experienced? It's just a simple trap for someone who is a threat to him. For Pain there is no psychological pressure at all. Chapter 483. When Nangongja forced Pain to retreat, Nangongja's figure instantly appeared beside the sword formation that trapped Hoodlum. Nangongja gently swiped his finger across the tribulation sword in his hand. A tiny black dot of light that gave off a dangerous aura that could not be ignored rotated at the tip of his finger. Nangongja used his mind to check the dot of light that came from the tribulation sword. He seemed to find that it had stabilized. Nangongja nodded slightly and pointed his finger at the sword formation. The black dot of light rushed towards the sword formation as if it had received an order. It was like a drop of thick ink in a glass of white water. The originally transparent sword chi with a slight blue luster was now completely dyed black. If one looked carefully at the sword chi that had been dyed black, it was not difficult to see that there were traces of black lightning floating on it from time to time. This black speck of light was a strand of chi of heavenly thunder that Nangongja had extracted from the tribulation sword in his hand. The tribulation sword was a divine weapon that had been born under the heavenly punishment by chance. In the process of familiarizing himself with the tribulation sword, his grasp of the tribulation lightning within the tribulation sword became stronger and stronger. Right now, Nangongja was using Hoodlum, who was trapped in the sword formation, to try and integrate the heavenly punishment lightning into his sword chi. After all, he wasn't that proficient and couldn't integrate the heavenly punishment lightning directly into his sword chi. Therefore, Nangongja could only temporarily force away Pain, who was fighting with him, to attack Hoodlum from the side of the sword formation with his sword chi. When the tribulation lightning was integrated into the sword chi, Hoodlum could clearly feel that the attack he had to endure directly increased by a level. Every time Hoodlum's extremely hard and tough wooden stick that was condensed from chakra intersected with the sword chi, an extremely destructive lightning would be released from the sword chi and invade the wooden stick in his hand. If Hoodlum had not discovered it in time and used chakra to separate his hand from the wooden stick in his hand, the lightning would have invaded his body. After receiving 6 or 7 sword chis, the wooden stick in Hoodlum's hand had already turned from a strange white color to a charred black from the high temperature. Hoodlum sensed that the wooden stick in his hand couldn't withstand more sword chi attacks, so he diverted some of his attention to human Dao Pain and Azura Dao Pain, who were watching from afar. His eyes flashed with annoyance. Although his teleportation ability could not be used due to the sudden sense of crisis, he actually still had many methods to resist Nangongja's sword chi. However, these methods could expose his ability. Revealing this level of Mokutan ninjutsu was already the limit of Hoodlum's power. He brandished the wooden stick in his hand, shattering the sword chi that was difficult to dodge. The wooden stick in his hand also broke into several charcoal-like pieces after a crisp sound. Hoodlum looked at Pain and said loudly, "Pain, are you going to just watch like this? It doesn't matter if I die, but if your plan for me is gone, there will be a lot of inconveniences, right? You are." Hoodlum didn't continue his words, but the threat in his words was so obvious. Pain, who was standing in front of Nagato, frowned slightly. As a proud person, Pain didn't like the feeling of being threatened. However, Pain knew that under his indulgence, Nangongja had already forced Hoodlum to a certain extent. Since Hoodlum didn't care about their relationship and started to threaten him, he couldn't just let it slide. He nodded to Azura Dao Pain behind him, indicating for Azura Dao Pain to use his ability to rescue Hoodlum from this predicament. Shura Realm and Mortal Realm, who were telepathic, naturally understood each other's thoughts. Shura Realm Pain's head suddenly split from the middle like a puppet. Shura Realm Pain's head didn't have the various organs that a normal person should have. Instead, there was a strange energy-gathering device in his head. This is the most powerful weapon of the Shura realm, which has a variety of thermal weapons. This is a chakra cannon similar to a particle cannon. A large amount of energy is condensed in this chakra-gathering device. After accumulating power for a period of time, a thick energy beam shining with white light with a red halo shot out from Shura Dao Pain's head. This energy pillar rushed towards Nangongja and the sword formation that imprisoned Hoodlum at a speed that was beyond what could be seen with the naked eye. Nangongja immediately became alert and channeled all of his internal energy into his legs as he jumped up with all his might. After narrowly dodging the powerful particle cannon, Nangongja returned to his senses and looked at the sword formation that trapped Hoodlum. At this moment, Azura Dao Pain's energy pillar and the sword Chi sword array had formed a strange state of equilibrium. Both sides were constantly wearing down the energy contained in each other. The sword Chi's, sword arrays and particle beams from the particle cannons disappeared at the same time. Hoodlum's figure charged out from the shockwaves caused by the collision of the two types of energy. After Hoodlum rushed out from the shockwave, he was in a sorry state. Hoodlum's black Akatsuki robe with red clouds on it had been slashed several times. Although there was still a layer of clothing underneath, Hoodlum's skin could still be seen through some of the deeper wounds. Hoodlum's skin color was similar to the pale white color of wood when he used wood release. This proved that Hoodlum had modified his body to a certain extent. Seems like Hoodlum's body has many secrets. What Nangongja could see, Pain naturally saw it too. Although he didn't say much, the fear in Pain's eyes became more and more profound. Chapter 484. In the center of Konoha, the rich land that used to be bustling with traffic was now in ruins. Jiraiya and Tendo Pain looked at each other just like when they first met. However, several black iron rods condensed by Pain's own chakra were inserted into Jiraiya's body. These iron rods were condensed by Pain's chakra, so when these iron rods were inserted into Jiraiya's body, Jiraiya's own chakra flow was also stopped. Jiraiya held the black iron rods inserted into his body with his hand. His face was slightly painful. After all, when these iron rods were inserted into Jiraiya's body, the special chakra mixed with the power of Rinnegan had already penetrated into Jiraiya's body. This also caused Jiraiya's flesh and blood to be extremely close to the black iron rods. Every time he touched the black iron rods, he felt the same as inserting kunai into his body. Ugh. Enduring the pain, Jiraiya pulled out the iron rods one by one. Blood flowed out from the holes in the iron rods. Glancing at his wounds, Jiraiya made a few hand seals, covering his palms with a thick layer of oil. Rubbing the oil on his wounds, although it didn't make the wounds heal quickly, it has stopped bleeding. Jiraiya-sensei, are you sure we want to continue fighting? Tendo Pain raised his head and glanced at Jiraiya, who was standing opposite him, screaming in pain because he pulled out the iron rods. He didn't care about the scorched black on his face because of Jiraiya's katan. He asked with an indifferent expression, "Just now, I was just testing my skills. Without immortal mode, you are no match for me at all. You should retreat as soon as possible, otherwise your life will definitely be left here." Pain's words were indifferent and even a bit contemptuous, but Jiraiya knew that Pain was right. In the previous battle, it seemed that the two were evenly matched. Although Jiraiya's injuries were slightly more serious than Tendo Pain's, they still had their advantages and disadvantages. But judging from the frequency of Pain's various strange ninjutsu and the amount of chakra left between the two of them, Jiraiya has fallen into a complete disadvantage. The chakra that was originally flowing in his body like a river has now become a trickle that seems to be on the verge of being cut off. Looking at Tendo Pain again, although there were a little traces on his body because of a moment of carelessness or deliberately losing, there was no way to affect Pain's state at this moment. Although there was a clear gap between the two sides, Jiraiya didn't mean to give up the fight at all. Using his hands on the ground, Jiraiya stood up straight with difficulty. Jiraiya stared at Tendo Pain with his tired eyes, then he said very seriously, "Pain? No, I'll just call you Nagato. You know my character. For me, the Woodleaf is my home, and it's the place I'm willing to give my life to protect. You destroyed my home like this, do you think I'll give up so easily?" Tendo Pain's stiff face also showed a self-deprecating smile at this moment. He looked at Jiraiya and said, "So many years have passed, but I haven't forgotten that you took in 3 children who didn't have any ability to protect themselves. It was you who gave us some ability to protect ourselves in a dangerous place like the ninja world. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are now. I know that Jiraiya-sensei may have regretted saving us 3 children. After all, it can be said that I destroyed your home with my own hands. However, I am still grateful for the kindness you have shown us back then, so I will personally present you with the best gift I can give you, so that you can leave this world with glory, not with illness all over your body. Let me, the God, who walks in the world, send you on your last glorious journey." Pain's words were ruthless, but they were full of a different kind of human touch. After all, for a ninja, the most unacceptable thing is to leave this world alone in a sickbed. When Jiraiya was young, he had been fighting with all kinds of enemies. Although he deliberately didn't let himself suffer any serious injuries, it was inevitable that many hidden injuries were left on his body. As he grew older, these injuries became more and more obvious. Jiraiya can still suppress the pain caused by such injuries with his profound cultivation, but Jiraiya knows that one day he won't be able to suppress such pain because of the weakness of his body. Jiraiya also had a strange thought in his mind. If he was really like what Tong Pan said, sacrificing his life to protect his home, maybe it would be a good thing. Thinking of this, Jiraiya suddenly felt that his heart became relaxed. His chest, which had become heavy and difficult to breathe because of sadness and anger, suddenly became light at this moment. Now the so-called revenge and compensation in Jiraiya's mind has become a lot lighter. At this moment, Jiraiya just wanted to be able to fight with his disciple happily. Jiraiya's mood change was also obviously noticed by Pain. Seeing that Jiraiya was relieved of all the heavy burdens in his heart and just wanted to fight happily, Pain's eyes seemed to have a bit of joy and envy. If he can, he also wants to put down all the unwillingness, anger and sadness in his heart and enjoy the battle. But he can't. Yahiko's life, the peace of the shinobi world, these heavy burdens are things that Nagato can't and is unwilling to put down. So, let's give something that I can't get to my teacher easily? Fight. 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 A voice shouted loudly in Jiraiya and Pain's heart. The two of them rushed towards each other with burning fighting spirit in their eyes. There was no unpredictable ninjutsu, no strange genjutsu. At this moment, Jiraiya and Pain were just fighting each other with the most primitive and most effective way to release their inner fighting spirit. At this moment, it seems that collecting bijou is not so important in Pain's heart. At this moment, Pain and Jiraiya only want the two of them to fight well. Chapter 485. Watergate stood up from his cross-legged posture and looked at the shadow clones sitting around him. Watergate's face showed a gratified smile. At this moment, whether it was Minato himself who had already stood up or the 9 shadow clones who were sitting cross-legged on the ground with their eyes closed, their eyes had turned into the orange frog eyes, and red eyeshadow had also appeared on their eyelids. At this moment, Watergate's posture is the perfect sage mode that Fukasaku Sennin said before. Except for his own eyes, there is no sign of toad transformation. Maintaining his human posture but being able to use Senjutsu chakra like an extension of his arm, this is the most perfect posture that has appeared among all the sage mode cultivators of Mount Myaboku. Thank you too. Looking at Fukasaku Sennin and Shima Sennin looking at him with gratification, Watergate bowed to the 2 toads, who have lived for God knows how long, to express his gratitude to them for helping him practice sage mode. After Fukasaku Sennin and Shima Sennin saw Watergate's gratitude to them, although they didn't say anything, the gratification in their eyes was so difficult to hide. Well, Watergate boy. Now is not the time to be polite with each other, now would Leaf and Jiraiya need your help more. When Fukasaku Sennin mentioned Jiraiya's name, Watergate's eyes flashed with a dignified look. Only after successfully practicing sage mode, did he know that Jiraiya, who fought against Pain Rikudo alone, had to have a death wish to be able to defeat such a powerful existence like Pain Rikudo. To Sennin, please open the restriction of Mount Myaboku now and let me return to Woodleaf. As the Hokage of Woodleaf, I've been late for a long time. After hearing Watergate's words, Fukasaku Sennin and Shima Sennin also made a few hand signs that they didn't know how to use ninjutsu and opened the outer barrier of Mount Myaboku. After seeing Fukasaku Sennin and Shima Sennin open the barrier, Watergate also used his Flying Thunder God Jutsu and Summoning Jutsu to instantly transfer to a relatively remote corner of Woodleaf Village. As soon as Watergate's figure stabilized, he immediately used Summoning Jutsu to summon Fukasaku Sennin and Shima Sennin to his side. He let the 2 Senjutsu stand on his shoulders to assist him in using Senjutsu Chakra to sense the invading enemies within the range of Konoha Village, and the Senjutsu driven by Senjutsu Chakra and the assistance of the 2 Senjutsu is naturally very effective. Combined with Watergate's understanding of Woodleaf Village, he quickly recognized the enemies in Woodleaf Village. 2 enemies who matched the aura of 6 Paths clone mentioned by Jiraiya were fighting fiercely in Nangongja's house at this moment, and beside these 2 people, in addition to Nangongja's aura, there was also the aura of a person who seemed to be very familiar with him. This person is the mysterious masked man who invaded Woodleaf more than 10 years ago and released 9 tails. When Watergate realized this, his heart was already filled with anger. But although Watergate's heart was very angry, he also knew that there were priorities. Although Watergate was not so clear about Nangongja's strength, he also perceived Nangongja's majestic energy through Sennin Jutsu, which was far more than the 3 enemies around him. Moving his attention away from Nangongja's house, Watergate quickly perceived the 3-6 paths clone of Pain wandering in the wood leaf, but seemed to have been entangled by the wood leaf ninjas. But Watergate still didn't decide to help the ninjas who were still entangled with Pain's Rikudo, but continued to search. Finally, Watergate found the figure he had been looking for. In the original center of wood leaf, Watergate felt the aura of Jiraiya and Tendo Pain at the same time. It's here. Watergate began to quickly use his Flying Thunder God Jutsu, and his figure flickered and suddenly appeared beside Jiraiya. For Watergate, who suddenly appeared on the battlefield, Jiraiya and Tendo Pain's reaction was naturally different. After discovering the Watergate, Tendo Pain immediately cast his own Shinra Tensei, but the target of the effect was not others but himself. In this way he quickly pulled away from Watergate and Jiraiya. Tendo Pain looked at Watergate standing opposite him with a guarded face. Because Pain was very sensitive to find that Watergate had a special aura after entering Sage Mode. Watergate, who has a physical fitness and ninjutsu talent beyond Jiraiya, must be far more powerful than Jiraiya after mastering Sage Mode. Watergate didn't care too much about Pain's guard against him. Because Watergate's eyes couldn't move away from Jiraiya's body at this moment. His teacher, who taught him since he was a child, was now covered with wounds. There were no less than 20 large and small wounds all over his body, which made Watergate very uncomfortable. But at the same time, Watergate was also very confused, because Jiraiya's eyes were so clear at this moment, without any anger or unwillingness at all, but with an indescribable sense of satisfaction. Sensei, leave the rest to me. Watergate looked at Jiraiya and said very seriously. Obviously, Watergate didn't intend to let Jiraiya continue to participate in the following battle. From the brief observation of Jiraiya's instinctive small movements just now, Watergate has discovered that Jiraiya's left arm and right leg have been seriously injured, and Jiraiya's chakra is also severely overdrawn. If he is not treated in time, his life will be in danger. Watergate called the little slug summoned by Tsunade, who had been hiding on the side and didn't dare to enter the battlefield, and put the little slug on Jiraiya's body. After the little slug talked to Tsunade, a green light with life aura was produced from the little slug's body, and it continuously flowed into Jiraiya's body. Seeing that Jiraiya had been treated, whether it was Watergate, Fukasaku Sennin and Shima Sennin, who had been standing on Watergate's shoulder, all showed a relaxed look on their faces. Watergate also finally shifted his gaze from Jiraiya to Pain, who was standing opposite with a serious face. Chapter 486. At the moment when Watergate and Tendo Pain's eyes met, although they didn't say anything, they launched their attacks at the same time. Watergate quickly took out his Flying Thunder God special kunai from the ninja tool bag behind him. The three-pronged kunai in Watergate's hand jumped and danced wantonly like a spirit with life. This was not Watergate deliberately showing his kunai skills, but through this method, Pain couldn't judge how the kunai in his hand would attack. Pain naturally also has rich experience in fighting enemies. Although he couldn't judge how the kunai in Watergate's hand would attack, he also quietly condensed his chakra towards his hands, so that he could use Shinra Tensei brought by Rinnegan at any time to bounce off Watergate's kunai. Watergate seemed to feel that his technique was enough to confuse Pain's vision, so he didn't hesitate to throw the special kunai in his hand out. After throwing out the kunai in his hand, Watergate continued to take out kunai from his ninja tool bag, and like a shower he continued to attack in the direction of Pain. It seems that the number of special kunai shot by Watergate has reached the limit of the amount that ordinary ninja tool bag can store, and after observing that the number of special kunai flying towards him has reached the optimal scale to cast Shinra Tensei, Pain also immediately made a move. He spread out his hands and shouted softly at the densely packed kunai in front of him. Shinra Tensei. A powerful repulsive force appeared in an instant. Although Watergate infused chakra and launched it by special means, such speed and power are still not comparable to the repulsive force in Shinra Tensei cast by Tendo Pain. After a short pause in the air, the kunai began to fly in the direction of Watergate. Seeing such a scene, Watergate didn't panic at all. After all, Watergate also learned some about Tendo Pain's ability from Jiraiya, so Watergate was naturally fully prepared. When the special kunai approached him, the senjutsu chakra that had been contained in Watergate's body instantly broke out. Under Watergate's control, senjutsu chakra turned into a thin line similar to the chakra used by ninja or puppet-type ninja. It passed through the hole on the kunai's handle, and the special kunai that were bounced back by Tendo Pain were all connected. Watergate waved his hand gently, and the special kunai that were originally shooting towards him were all in Watergate's hands. Watergate looked at Payne's direction and waved his hand, and the special kunai rushed in Payne's direction again. Not only that, Watergate's hand also quickly printed, and a ninjutsu was quickly cast by Watergate. Ninjutsu, many kunai shadowless clone jutsu. Using the shadow clone jutsu on his kunai, the originally huge number of special kunai also quickly turned into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8, and as far as the eye could see, there was an endless number of special kunai. If Nangongja was also here to watch the battle, it would not be difficult to find that although the multiple kunai shadowless clone jutsu used by Watergate seemed to be straightforward and without any pattern, in fact the chakra threads that Watergate just used to control these kunai were not removed by Watergate. Instead, they were still connected to the kunai, so these special kunai were actually constantly moving their positions and changing patterns, making it difficult to see the weakness of the attack. Although it was a bit cumbersome to say, it actually didn't take long from Watergate's control of the kunai to the production of a large number of kunai and flying towards Payne. In fact, it was only 2 or 3 seconds, and because of Watergate's chakra infusion, the flying speed of these kunai was also extremely fast. It took almost less than half a second to reach Tendo Payne's side. Tendo Payne did not use his own effective Shinra Tensei to bounce off these kunai as before. Instead, he stretched out his hands and 2 black iron rods condensed from his own chakra appeared in Payne's hands. Obviously, it was just 2 iron rods that looked quite light, but Payne waved them fiercely. Obviously, Payne had also deliberately practiced using his iron rods for a long time to engage in close combat. For a while, the clanging sound of the iron rods and kunai intertwining was endless. From time to time, it seemed that the kunai split by Watergate's kunai cloning technique were directly hit by Payne into a cloud of smoke and exploded in the air. Looking at Payne resisting his kunai attack, Minato was deep in thought. It was obvious that this kind of attack was the same as before. The previous Shinra Tensei could be easily dealt with by him, but why did Tendo Payne have to use his own taijutsu to resist these kunai that were attacking him? While Minato was thinking, Payne, who was attacked by countless kunai, threw away the 2 iron rods in his hands casually, opened his hands again and said in a cold voice, "Don't worry, I won't be able to stop you. But I won't be able to stop you." Shinra Tensei. As Payne recast his Shinra Tensei, the kunai that were still attacking Payne in the sky were directly bounced back by the repulsive force. Just now, Minato used a large amount of chakra to cast multiple kunai clone jutsu, but it was so easy to break through, but Minato didn't have any look of regret. Instead, he seemed to have found a way to win and his eyes revealed a hearty look. 5. 8 seconds. After Payne used his Shinra Tensei, it took 5. 8 seconds for him to use his Shinra Tensei again to bounce off his suffering uselessness. Although this time may not be so accurate, it was also a rare flaw of Tendo Payne that Watergate found after careful observation. "I'm not afraid of you being extremely powerful, but I'm afraid that you don't have the slightest flaw." As long as he could find a flaw, Watergate could expand such a flaw into a bottomless abyss with his own ability. An abyss that buries the lives of his enemies. This was the confidence that Watergate had as the 4th Hokage and as the wood leaf of Golden Flash. Chapter 487. A large number of special kunai were scattered on the ground. Such an attack method is not very wise for other ninjas. After all, the kunai created with a lot of chakra can't exert its full power in the face of Tendo Payne's profound taijutsu and Shinra Tensei. After careful calculation, it is actually not worth the loss. But Watergate is not an ordinary ninja, and the kunai launched by Watergate are not ordinary kunai. These special kunai scattered all over the battlefield are the space coordinates for Watergate to cast Flying Thunder God Jutsu, and a place with a large number of space coordinates is the best battlefield for Watergate. Payne also knows about Watergate's ability. These special kunai inserted in the large and small corners of the battlefield are the space coordinates of Watergate's Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Payne is also very clear about this. But Payne is unwilling to spend a lot of chakra again to destroy the battle environment created by Watergate for himself. Whether this is because of Payne's consideration of preserving his strength or because of his pride as a god, we don't know. When his battle environment and layout were completed, Watergate also nodded slightly. The test is over, so the real battle is about to begin, isn't it? Spiral Flash Super Wheel Dance Roar 3rd Style. A long and even a little funny name was spat out from Watergate's mouth, and when the first sound of this sentence came out from Watergate's mouth, Watergate's figure has already disappeared. Payne immediately became alert at the moment when Watergate's figure disappeared. Such a combination of high-speed space ninjutsu such as Flying Thunder God Jutsu and powerful ninjutsu such as Rasengan, any enemy has to be on guard. Sure enough, Watergate's figure suddenly appeared behind Pain, and in Watergate's hands were two Rasengan mixed with Senjutsu chakra, shining with blue light and a little green halo. Watergate just wanted to press the Rasengan in his hand on Pain's body, but Pain immediately reacted and directly jumped away from Watergate's attack, and quickly opened one of his hands in the direction of Watergate. Shinra Tensei. A powerful repulsive force immediately acted on Watergate's body, although Watergate also has the ability to resist such repulsive force for a while. But Watergate completely took such a repulsive attack as if he was not on guard, and Watergate's figure directly flew out under the influence of the repulsive force. The white Haori on his body was blown away by the strong wind, and Watergate has entered Sage mode at this moment. He can quickly cast his Flying Thunder God Jutsu with the help of Senjutsu chakra. So Watergate's body was still flying because of the repulsive attack, but Watergate disappeared out of thin air in mid-air. Pain felt like he was fooled. Watergate's attack speed just now was not Watergate's fastest attack speed. When Pain carefully thought about the scene just now, it was not difficult to find that Watergate deliberately led him to cast his Shinra Tensei. Others don't know, but Pain's heart is very clear. Although his Shinra Tensei has great power, it can only be cast with the help of the power of Rinnegan. Every time he casts it, Rinnegan needs to go through a short period of power accumulation before he can use it again. And such a power accumulation time is not long, but it is not short, a full 5 seconds. When he casts Shinra Tensei, it is equivalent to going through a dangerous period of 5 seconds. In such a dangerous period, if he was facing a ninja who wasn't that strong, he wouldn't need to care much about it, but the one standing in front of him was Namikaze Minato, whose strength was almost beyond the ordinary Kage tier, and after using Sage mode, Minato's danger level was enough to rival those ninjas who had become legends in the world of ninja. Before Pain had time to think about it, Watergate's figure appeared again. Unlike the previous deliberately slow speed that could be detected by Pain, this time Watergate almost completely displayed his terrifying speed after being enhanced by the Senjutsu chakra. And in order to make his attack more confusing, Watergate even constantly jumped between different spatial coordinates. Even with the help of his Rinnegan, it was difficult for Pain, who was standing on the opposite side of Minato, to detect which one was the real Minato and which one was the shadow of the densely packed Minato standing around him. And even if Pain can really detect where Watergate's real body is, what can he do? As long as Watergate's mind moves, he can instantly replace the afterimages in other places. Therefore, for Pain, he can only catch Watergate's attack, or use a large-scale ninjutsu when Watergate hasn't launched an attack on himself, directly covering Watergate's real body and his afterimages completely. Senjutsu, Yin-Yang Spiral Maru. Watergate's figure jumped several times, and his real body cooperated with those afterimages to confuse Pain. Watergate finally pressed the two Rasengan in his hand mixed with Senjutsu chakra on Pain's body. At the same time when Rasengan attacked Tendo Pain, Minato shouted the name of the ninjutsu he used. Pain, who was unprepared, or even if he was prepared, he couldn't avoid Watergate's attack. When the two Rasengan attacked him at the same time, he was hit by Watergate's Rasengan rotating in two different ways. The two forces, one positive and one negative, acted on Pain's body at the same time. Under the influence of the huge explosive force and impact, Pain's figure was immediately sent flying. Just now it was Watergate who was hit by Shinra Tensei. In just a few seconds Pain became the one who flew out. However, although Pain was powerful, he was not Watergate. In the process of flying out, there was no way to adjust his body with Flying Thunder God Jutsu, so Pain's body could only directly hit a relatively large piece of debris, splashing a lot of smoke. Although his attack was very effective, Minato didn't let his guard down. After all, his enemy was Pain, the leader of Akatsuki. Although such an attack may cause some trouble to him, it was not enough to directly defeat such an enemy. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.